I still remember my first night alone at the station. The place was smaller than I'd imagined. A single-story brick building that smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead like a constant low sigh. I'd been trained for months, shadowing seasoned dispatchers who made everything seem routine. But that night, everything felt different, like the building itself was awake, listening. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, each second dragging longer than the one before. I had my headset on, my hands hovering over the console, staring at the monitors that flickered with maps, radio signals, and the tiny logs of calls coming through. Usually, the quiet of the night was comforting. Tonight, it was heavy, almost suffocating. The first call came in just after 12:30. A man reporting a broken-down car on the highway. Routine. I guided him through turning on his hazard lights, calling for a tow, making sure he was safe until a patrol car could reach him. His voice sounded strained, though. Nothing I could pinpoint exactly. Just an edge, like he was holding back fear. After that, there was a lull. Hours stretched between calls, each tick of the clock louder than the last. I tried to keep myself busy, scanning the monitors, noting the usual traffic reports, but the silence was gnawing at me. Then, a call came in that froze me just for a second. A voice, quiet, shaky, almost a whisper. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I adjusted my headset, thinking it was just a weak signal. "This is dispatch." "Who's calling?" I said. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. I'm lost," the caller replied. The words barely made sense. The line crackled, distorted. "I can't see anything, the trees, the fog." I checked the coordinates that popped up on my screen. Empty woods. Nothing nearby. Not a single road. "Ma'am, where exactly are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. There was a long pause. Too long. Then, "I don't know, it's just moving." "Moving?" I asked. "Yes, it follows me." The voice trembled. Then static. Just static. I tried calling back, but the line was dead. My stomach sank. I knew enough to know that people got lost in the woods, but something about the way they said it, the way their voice quivered, didn't sound like panic from confusion. It sounded like terror from knowing they weren't alone. I shook it off, telling myself I was imagining things. Rookie nerves. I'd handled calls before. This wasn't real. Just another night. The next call was a noise complaint at a farm on the outskirts of town. Old Mr. Henson's voice crackled over the radio. "They're out there. I hear them. But I don't see anything," he said. "Who do you hear, sir?" I asked. "You don't understand. It's not people. It's like shadows talking to each other. Whispering. Around the barn." I typed notes, my fingers trembling slightly. Shadows talking? That wasn't possible. But the fear in his voice was undeniable. My stomach clenched, and I realized I was holding my breath. Hours passed, and the calls kept coming. Nothing major. A car accident on a back road. A barking dog wandering in someone's yard. Each call was routine, almost comforting in its normalcy. But between the calls, the silence wasn't empty. It felt crowded, like something was watching from just beyond the reach of the monitors, just beyond the range of my vision. I started to notice patterns. The static on the radio wasn't always random. Sometimes it sounded like faint voices. Sometimes almost like words. I couldn't catch them at first. Just fleeting syllables that slipped away when I concentrated too hard. But then I thought I heard my name once. Maybe twice. My heart started to pound every time the static hissed. I would lean in, trying to catch something coherent, and it would vanish. By 3 a.m, exhaustion had begun to set in. My eyes burned, my back ached from sitting too long, and I was aware that I hadn't even thought to eat. I told myself that once the next shift arrived, I'd laugh this off. Just nerves. First night alone. Everything normal. Then the call came in. Not a 911 call, not a civilian report. Just a crackle over the radio. A voice speaking in a slow, deliberate tone. "Are you listening?" I froze. The voice wasn't coming from a person dialing in. It wasn't on the usual lines. It came through the station's radio feed itself. Flat, metallic, impossible to trace. Yes, I'm listening. I whispered back, though I knew it was useless. Good, it said. They know you're here. The line went dead. My hands were shaking. I tried to call it back, to contact the patrols. Anyone. Nothing. The monitors were fine. The phones were fine. It was just me. I kept checking the cameras, staring at the parking lot, the empty streets outside. Nothing moved. The wind whispered against the building. The fluorescent lights hummed. I felt like my own shadow was watching me, stretching just beyond the reach of the monitors. Minutes or hours later, another call came. A young woman, driving down a country road, reporting something in her headlights. She was frantic, gasping between words. I think it's following me, she said. Following you? What is? I asked. I don't know. It's dark, so dark. It shouldn't be moving like that. Her voice cut out mid-sentence. The line went silent. My hands hovered over the console, unsure what to do. The coordinates placed her in the middle of the forest again. The same forest from earlier. I tried calling her back, but there was no response. I felt cold then, a creeping chill crawling up my spine. I wrapped my arms around myself, telling myself it was just my imagination, that it was the isolation, the fatigue, the loneliness. But deep down, I knew it wasn't imagination. I could feel in the way the room seemed smaller, heavier, like the shadows pressed closer to me the longer I sat there. Hours dragged past in a haze of monitors, crackling radios, and the occasional distant siren. I tried to focus, to do my job, but my mind kept wandering. Every faint sound made me flinch. Every flicker of the fluorescent lights made me look around. Every gust of wind rattling the windows made me feel like something was out there, just beyond sight, waiting. By 4 in the morning, I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to leave. My shift dragged on endlessly. The calls had slowed, but the feeling hadn't. The silence was heavier than ever, filled with possibility and threat. The unknown pressing in from the darkness beyond the station. I thought about going to the bathroom, but my legs felt like lead. I felt trapped, though the door was right there, and the lot outside was empty. Then the final call came. Not a report, not a complaint. Just a voice, faint, almost pleading. Don't let them see you. Static swallowed the words. I didn't even try to respond. My fingers froze on the console. My chest tightened. I could feel something watching, listening, knowing I was alone. By the time dawn's first light began to creep across the horizon, painting the parking lot in pale gray, I was still sitting there, exhausted, trembling, and unable to speak. The building felt the same, but I knew it had changed. The shadows were still there, waiting, always waiting. I never told anyone about that first night. The other dispatchers noticed my quietness, my jumpiness, but they chalked it up to nerves, rookie mistakes. I told myself it was fine. It had to be, but deep down, I knew that night had been different. Something had moved through the county, through the lines, through the radio static, and I had heard it, and I knew somehow that it hadn't stopped. I remember the call like it happened yesterday, though it's been months. It started like any other night, the monitors glowing softly, the hum of the station almost comforting after the chaos of the day's shift. I was alone again, my rookie hands hovering over the console, trying not to tense with every flicker of light or static hiss. The line went live, a sharp beep cutting through the quiet. 911, what's your emergency? I said, my voice steady, even though I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. The voice that answered was panicked, a whisper trembling through the headset. They're in my house, the caller said. I frowned, tried to catch the words. The line was garbled, crackling, as if the person was far away, or somewhere they shouldn't be. Ma'am, I need you to calm down. Can you tell me your address? I can't. The voice broke off, almost like someone had clamped a hand over their mouth. The words came faster now, clipped, panicked. It's dark, they're moving the walls. I swallowed hard. I'd dealt with panic callers before, but there was something in her tone that made my stomach twist. Pure, unfiltered terror. Who's in the walls? What's happening? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. coaxing her to respond. The line went dead. Just static. A hiss that seemed to fill the room. My fingers hovered over the buttons to call her back, but every attempt rang unanswered. The coordinates she'd sent through the system were odd. A private residence, yes, but the address didn't exist in the county's records. I leaned back, heart racing, trying to make sense of it. Maybe she'd misdialed, panicked, hallucinating from stress or substance. That's what I told myself. That's what I had to tell myself. Otherwise, I might have lost it right there. I pulled up the audio recording of the call. I had to hear it again to make sense of it. The panicked breathing, the whispered words, the frantic urgency. It all played back, the hiss of static growing louder between syllables. And then I noticed it. Something I hadn't heard the first time. A faint whisper layered under the call, almost indecipherable. It wasn't her voice. It was something else. Slow, deliberate, and curling around the edges of the panicked words like smoke in a room. They see you, it said, or at least that's what I thought I heard. I played it over and over, each time hearing it a little clearer. They see you, don't. I jerked back from the console. My hands shook. That voice hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. My mind raced. Was it a glitch? A leftover recording from another line? My own imagination feeding on the panic? But then the phone rang again. I picked it up, voice trembling slightly despite my effort to stay calm. 911, what's your emergency? No one answered. Just breathing. Slow, deliberate, echoing. I felt my chest tighten. Something about it didn't feel human, though I couldn't explain why. The line clicked, went silent. I set the phone down slowly, feeling a cold sweat on my neck. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing. Fatigue, nerves, the stress of being alone on the graveyard shift. But when I glanced at the audio recording again, the whisper was clearer now. Not just, they see you, but words I couldn't fully make out, like a language I almost remembered from somewhere else, somewhere wrong. Hours passed in silence. Calls came and went. Routine accidents, barking dogs, drunken arguments, but I couldn't focus. Every time a line beeped, my hands jumped, my pulse spiking. I kept replaying that one call, trying to parse the whisper, but the more I listened, the more it felt alive, like it was watching me, knowing I was listening, twisting itself into my mind. At one point, I started hearing it even without the audio. Faint whispers in the hum of the monitors. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe not. I didn't dare tell anyone. They'd call me crazy. I didn't want to be dismissed or worse, questioned for my judgment. But the whispers grew clearer, always on the edge of understanding. I remember standing up, pacing the room. The walls felt closer than usual, the fluorescent lights brighter than they should be. The quiet wasn't comforting anymore. It pressed against my ears, filled my skull with tension, and I knew I was being watched. I could feel it in my spine, the crawl of something unseen along the edge of perception. I tried to focus on something mundane, anything normal. I wrote down the details of the call, the coordinates, the timestamps. My handwriting was shaky, uneven, but I needed proof, something tangible. But the more I wrote, the more the whispers followed, wrapping around the words on the page, twisting them until they seemed to pulse and breathe. By 4 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I shut off the monitors, silenced the radios, and sat in the darkened station, listening to nothing, or maybe to everything. The hum of the building, the faint creak of pipes, the static that never truly went away. Then it came again, a whisper, soft, almost intimate. Do you see them? I froze. My pulse pounded, my hands gripping the edge of the desk. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My own voice seemed swallowed by the dark. The whisper lingered, curling through the room, around the walls, pressing into my mind. I wanted to tell myself it was a trick of the radio, some interference, anything rational. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Minutes or hours later, I don't know which, the sun began to rise. Pale light creeping into the station, washing over the monitors, illuminating the room in a false sense of safety. I felt my body relax slightly, but the unease lingered. The whisper didn't fade. It had embedded itself into my memory, my thoughts, my nightmares. I saved a recording, marked it for review. I couldn't delete it, though part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to erase that night entirely, to pretend it never happened. But it was real, too real, and I knew if I listened too closely, it might come back, might find me again. Even now, when I close my eyes, I hear it sometimes. Faint, almost drowned in the hum of everyday life, but always there, waiting, watching, knowing I'm listening. That call changed me, made me understand that some things don't stay confined to lines or coordinates or monitors. Some things move through the gaps, through the static, and into the mind of whoever is foolish enough to listen. And once they do, they don't leave. Not completely. Not ever. By the third week of night shifts, I thought I had grown used to the quiet hum of the station. I thought I had learned to ignore the tension that curled at the edges of every late-night call. I was wrong. There's a point when silence stops being comforting, when static on the radio stops being background noise. That night, I found that point. It began just after midnight. The usual lull had stretched longer than normal. My coffee had gone cold, untouched. The monitors glowed faintly, showing empty streets and darkened houses. The only sound in the room was a low buzz of fluorescent lights, like the building itself was breathing slowly. And then I heard it, a whisper through the static on one of the channels. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a fragment of someone else's call echoing through the system. But as I listened, it became clear. The static wasn't random. It mimicked voices, voices I had heard on previous calls, voices of people reported missing. "Please help," one whispered, almost indistinguishable from the crackle of the line. I froze, hand hovering over the console, trying to tell myself it was a glitch. But the more I listened, the more voices emerged. A young boy's voice, trembling, calling for his mother. A woman screaming something I couldn't quite understand. And then, unmistakably, the voice of Mr. Henson, the farmer from a few nights ago, muttering about shadows in his barn. I leaned closer to the speaker, my stomach twisting. There was no pattern, no order, just fragments of fear, stitched into the static like a hidden language. Every time I thought I could identify a voice, it slipped away, replaced by another. The shadows outside the station seemed to shift at the same time. I caught movement at the edge of the parking lot through the security monitors, just beyond the reach of the floodlights. At first, I convinced myself it was a trick of the dim light, a branch swaying in the wind. But then the movement grew bolder. Figures, indistinct, featureless, seemed to linger near the edge of the lot, watching, waiting. I tried calling it in, tried telling the sheriff on duty to check the perimeter. The line was silent, not dead, but empty, like the voices themselves had swallowed the conversation before it could begin. My pulse accelerated. I felt a cold sweat run down my back. The static whispered louder, pressing closer, curling around my thoughts. "Don't look," one voice hissed, and I realized it wasn't coming from the monitor. It was in the room with me, low, inside my skull, riding on the hum of the lights. I spun around. The station was empty. Just the monitors, the empty chairs, the faint smell of coffee. But the feeling of being watched was undeniable. The shadows stretched closer, as if inching along the walls toward me. I told myself to breathe, to calm down. It was just my mind, overstressed and fatigued. That had to be it. But then I heard the footsteps. Not on the floor, not in the hallways. Outside, slow, deliberate, circling the building. I pressed my face to the glass of the front door. Nothing, just the empty parking lot, drenched in pale moonlight. Yet the sound persisted. Step, pause, each one heavier than the last, dragging across the asphalt like it had weight. I sat back in my chair, trying to rationalize. Maybe it was someone walking a dog, maybe a patrol checking in. But the static didn't lie. The voices didn't lie. I could hear them, overlapping, whispering fragments of their last moments. Panic, fear, confusion. And then, unmistakably, one of them called my name. It was soft at first, a gentle hiss beneath the static, but it grew louder, clearer, until I could hear it even over the hum of the station's fluorescent lights. "Nimra?" I bolted upright, my chair clattering against the floor. I told myself I had imagined it, but the sound of my name wasn't in my head. It came from the speaker, riding the static carried by the voices of the missing. I could feel it in my chest, twisting my stomach, curling around my ribs like a cold hand. I tried to call out, to speak into the microphone, but my voice was swallowed. The radio channel picked up only the whispers. They spoke in fragments, a broken conversation that made no sense, yet filled me with a creeping understanding I couldn't place. They're here waiting. I shook my head. My hands flew over the console, tried to change channels, trying to silence the static, try to reach anyone. But the voices followed, no matter the frequency I chose. Even when I unplugged the speakers, I could hear them faint, haunting, like they were inside the walls, inside the building, inside me. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time blurred when the static spoke. I can't be sure. Every time I thought the voices had faded, they returned, layered over one another, growing, twisting, overlapping. One seemed to whisper about the station itself, another about the woods behind it, another about people I had never met but somehow knew. I tried to leave my chair, to step outside into the pale light, and prove to myself there was nothing. But when I touched the doorknob, I froze. The shadows on the asphalt had shifted. They were closer, watching, waiting. I could feel their presence in the cold air brushing against my skin, felt their eyes boring into me from somewhere unseen. I retreated back to the console, desperate for logic. The monitors showed nothing unusual. Empty streets, empty lots, silent security cameras. But the voices didn't stop. They whisper about my mistakes, about nights like this one, about things I couldn't see but could feel. Every whisper cut deeper than the last, leaving a hollow ache in my chest. And then, unexpectedly, the static imitated me. I swear I heard my own voice through the fuzz, repeating things I hadn't said aloud, questions I hadn't asked, pleas I hadn't made. My heart hammered. My hands shook uncontrollably. It wasn't just mimicry. It was awareness. Something had listened. Something had learned, and now it could use me against myself. I tried to turn the volume down, tried to shut everything off, tried to leave the building, but the whispers followed. Every step I took, they were there. Every breath I drew, they echoed it back. I realized then truly that there was no escaping them. Not through action, not through logic. They were here, in the walls, in the static, in me. By the time the sun began to lift its pale light over the horizon, I was shaking, slumped over the console, barely conscious. The whispers had faded only slightly, retreating to the edges of perception, leaving me hollow, drained, terrified. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave the station forever, but I knew it wouldn't matter, because even in daylight, the memory of those voices lingered. Their echo remained in my mind, in the way I could almost hear them behind every hum, every whisper, every flicker of light. The shadows outside had disappeared, but the feeling of being watched never left. And the static, I could still hear it sometimes, faint, on channels that should be silent. It always finds me, always waits for me to be alone, always ready to whisper. I learned that night that some things move through the spaces we ignore, the empty corners, the gaps in the air. And if you listen long enough, they begin to talk to you, shaping your fear into something that feels real, something that presses against your mind until you can't tell where you end and they begin. That night, I understood it. The static isn't random. It's patient. It remembers the missing. It calls their names. And it waits for the next listener, the next shift, the next night, to draw them in. I never stayed alone in the station after that. Not really. And yet, when I close my eyes at night, I can still hear it. Faint, distant, curling around my thoughts, waiting for quiet, waiting for me. I don't even know when it started. One moment. I was sitting at the console, exhausted, replaying the calls from the night, trying to make sense of the static and the whispers. The next, I heard it, my own voice. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Fatigue plays tricks on the mind, especially on night shifts. I'd been alone too long, staring at monitors that hummed and flickered in the dark. But the sound was too real, too precise. The way I said my own name, the slight catch in my tone, the faint panic I hadn't yet allowed myself to feel. It was me. Help, please. I froze. My hand hovered over the console. The microphone sat just inches from my face. My voice had never sounded like that. Soft, pleading, almost breaking. But it wasn't coming from the microphone. It was coming from the speakers, from the same frequency I used to speak to callers, to patrols, to the outside world. I swallowed hard. My pulse was racing, a hammer against my ribs. I checked the microphones, the channels, the outgoing lines. All dead, all silent. There should have been nothing. And yet there it was again. Help me. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. Every instinct screamed at me to unplug the system, to run, to leave the building entirely. But my legs refused to obey. My fingers trembled over the keyboard, unable to type, unable to call for backup. I was trapped in my own station, in my own mind, with my voice echoing from nowhere. I pressed my palms to my ears, telling myself it was hallucination, my own fear amplified by exhaustion. But it wasn't in my head. I could hear it clearly, like it was standing right behind me, begging, trembling, vulnerable, and each time it spoke, I could feel a weight pressing down on my chest, like something unseen was sitting there, staring, waiting. I forced myself to breathe, slow, deliberate breaths. Maybe I could reason it out. Maybe it was a delayed recording of a call I'd made earlier. Maybe the system had glitched. I replayed the channels, checked the logs. Nothing. No previous calls, no outgoing messages. The line had been completely silent before that voice spoke. My voice, my own voice. I leaned closer to the console, half expecting to see someone on the monitors, a figure lurking, some prankster trying to scare me. But the parking lot was empty. The streetlights outside flickered, but there was no one. The station was just me, alone, and yet the voice persisted. Help, please. I don't know how long I sat there, listening, frozen, waiting for something to happen. Each repetition of my own voice twisted my stomach into tighter knots. It wasn't just imitation. It was awareness. Something was out there, or in here, that knew me, knew my fear, knew exactly how to unsettle me. I tried to speak. I forced my voice out of my throat, trembling, barely audible. This is dispatch. Who is calling? Silence. And then my voice again. Please help me. I sank into my chair, wrapping my arms around myself. The coldness in the room had nothing to do with temperature. It pressed against my skin, through my clothes, into my bones. I wanted to scream, to call someone, anyone, but the voice was louder than I was. It filled the room. It swallowed my thoughts. I thought about the people we lost, the missing, the vanished, the ones whose voices I had heard through the static in previous weeks. How they sounded over the channels, sometimes calling for help, sometimes whispering fragments of words I couldn't understand. I realized then that the same thing was happening to me. My own voice had joined the chorus. My fear had been heard, and now it was being reflected back at me, amplified, warped. I forced myself to move, to reach for the security monitors. Maybe I could see something. Maybe I could convince myself it was just my imagination. I scrolled through the cameras, the parking lot, the streets, the empty buildings. Nothing. No movement. No shadow. Just silence. Just darkness. Just a faint flicker of light on the asphalt. And still my voice. Help, please. I thought about turning off the monitors, shutting down the consoles, unplugging the station entirely. But I couldn't. It felt like something would notice. Something that had been patient, watching, waiting. Something that had learned me, learned my fear, and now use it against me. I pressed my hands to my head, tried to steady my breathing, tried to tell myself it was impossible, that my voice couldn't be coming from nowhere, that my mind wasn't playing tricks. But then I realized it wasn't nowhere. It was everywhere. It was in the hum of the fluorescent lights, in the software of the monitors, in the vibration of the station itself. It was inside me as much as it was outside. I thought about leaving, thought about running out into the parking lot, into the street, away from the building entirely. But I couldn't. My legs refused to move. I was paralyzed by fear, by the knowledge that whatever had copied my voice wasn't bound by doors or walls. It was patient. It was aware. It was waiting. I tried again to speak into the microphone, my own voice breaking, trembling. "This is dispatch. Who is calling?" Static answered me, a low hiss that seemed to wrap around my skull. And then, again, my voice. "Help, please." I could feel tears welling in my eyes, though I tried to stop them. I couldn't let them see me like this. I couldn't let myself fall apart. But the voice was insistent, growing stronger, repeating my fear back to me in a slow, deliberate rhythm that I couldn't escape. I leaned forward, burying my face in my hands. The world narrowed down to sound, to vibration, to the impossibility of my own voice speaking from nowhere. I thought about the missing, the calls I had taken before, how their voices had seemed to linger, follow me even after the shift ended, how they had found a way to reach the living through static, through frequency, through the gaps we didn't notice. And now it was me. I don't remember how long I stayed there, minutes or hours. It's impossible to say. Time lost all meaning. All I knew was that I was alone, trapped in a room with a sound that was mine but not mine, calling for help I couldn't give. My own panic became part of the echo, folded into the frequency, returned to me in the voice of a ghost I didn't yet understand. By the time dawn's pale light crept over the horizon, I was slumped at the console, exhausted, trembling. My hands felt numb. My head throbbed. My ears still rang with the echo of my voice. The parking lot outside was empty. No shadows lingered. No movement. Just the quiet, the monitors, the fluorescent hum. But I knew it hadn't ended. Not really. My voice had been taken, duplicated, distorted, and now it belonged to something else. Something patient. Something that could wait for me alone, in the dark, on the next graveyard shift. I told myself it was over. I forced myself to stand, to step into the light, to breathe fresh air. I tried to leave the station, to pretend I hadn't heard it, that I hadn't felt it crawling inside me. But even outside, even in the early morning calm, I could hear it faintly, a whisper and a hum of the world, my voice calling, begging, echoing into nothing. And I understood then that being a dispatcher was more than handling calls. It was listening, always listening. And if you weren't careful enough, it would listen back. I never wanted to be alone on the frequency again. But that night taught me something worse than fear. It taught me that some things don't wait quietly. They learn. They observe. They take what is yours and use it against you. And once they've spoken through you, once they've made your voice their own, there's no going back. Even now, when I'm not at the station, when the phones are silent, when the monitors are dark, I can hear it. Faint, insistent, patient, my own voice calling for help, and I know that it will always be there, waiting for the next time I'm alone. The highway was empty at 3 a.m. The kind of empty that makes you feel like the world is folded in on itself. I'd been on this stretch of road 1,000 times, patrolling the rural areas beyond the county line. But something about that night felt off, even before I heard the first knock. The radio crackled faintly in the patrol car, nothing more than background noise. I sipped lukewarm coffee from a styrofoam cup, trying to shake the sleep from my body. My headlights cut through the fog that had rolled in, thick and heavy, swallowing the shoulders of the road. Trees leaned close on either side, their branches scraping against one another in the wind. It was quiet in a way that made your ears ring. That's when I heard it, a soft knock. Not the kind of knock from a door, not the kind from a branch falling, but deliberate. A steady tap, tap, tap. I slowed the car, trying to locate the source. Nothing. Just a long, abandoned farmhouse sitting off the road, dark and silent. The boards over the windows rattled in the wind, but that wasn't making the sound I had just heard. I shook my head, muttering to myself, probably a loose shutter. I eased the car forward, headlights grazing the crumbling porch. And then I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. Closer this time, like someone or something was walking alongside the house, just out of the light. I grabbed the radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 3. Checking an abandoned residence off County Line Road. possible trespasser. No response. The crackle of static was the only reply. My pulse sped up. Normally, dispatch would at least acknowledge a call. I glanced around, headlights scanning the yard. Nothing, just the fog curling across the grass. I stepped out of the car, boots crunching on the gravel. The cold hit me like a wall. The fog was thick now, rolling in over my knees. The knocking had stopped. I strained my ears, listening to the silence, and then I thought I heard whispers, faint, almost too quiet to be real. "Hello?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the fog. No answer, just the wind moving through the broken windows, the hollow groan of the building itself. I circled the porch slowly, flashlight cutting through the mist. My mind raced, telling me it was probably nothing. Vagrants, maybe a drunken kid, or just an animal knocking a loose board. But my gut told me something else. Something that didn't belong. Then I heard it again. A whisper, distinct, deliberate, almost like a name. Or maybe a warning. I couldn't be sure. The fog seemed to press closer, and my flashlight shook in my hand. I could feel my heart hammering, every beat echoing in my chest. I stepped back toward the car, telling myself to leave. This was an abandoned place. Nothing here should matter. But as I turned, a knock sounded from the back of the house. One sharp, deliberate rap. My breath caught. The sound was too rhythmic, too controlled. I swallowed hard. "Who's there?" I called, voice rough. No answer. Only the wind, only the fog, only the feeling that I wasn't alone. I tried the radio again. "Dispatch, I'm not seeing anything, but there's activity at the old Henson place." Still nothing, just the hum of static. I glanced over my shoulder at the road, the car's lights cutting a pale yellow path through the mist. My mind kept going back to that knock. It didn't sound like wood. Not really. It sounded deliberate in a way that chilled me, like someone or something was announcing their presence. But not to me, not yet. I leaned back against the car, trying to steady my nerves. The whisper came again, soft, so low I had to strain to hear it, like it was moving through the fog itself, not from a voice but from the air, curling around me. I couldn't make out the words. I didn't need to. The tone was enough. An intent I couldn't describe, but one I felt deep in my bones. I took a step forward. My flashlight scanned the yard again. The fog shifted, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure, just for a second, standing near the side of the barn. Featureless, dark, blending with the shadows. My stomach twisted. I blinked. It was gone. I told myself I'd imagined it. Fatigue, fog, stress, nothing more. I circled the front porch once more. Every floorboard groan, every rustle of leaves sounded amplified in the fog. Then I heard the knock again, this time from inside the house. A sharp, single tap, like someone rapping on a table or the wall. My flashlight swept the window panes. Empty. The house hadn't had doors in years. They were boarded up. My chest tightened. I tried to rationalize. Animals? Rodents? No, that sound was human, intentional, and it had come from somewhere it shouldn't exist. I backed toward the car slowly, never turning my back. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't shake the whisper, curling to the fog, moving with me, keeping pace. I realized then that the noise, the taps, the whispers, they weren't random. They were marking something, observing, waiting. I climbed into the car, slamming the door. The engine started with a growl, cutting through the fog. I drove slowly past the farmhouse, scanning the side mirrors. Nothing, just the pale mist curling over the road. But the feeling stayed, that sense of being watched, of something moving just outside the light, followed me down the highway. The knocks and whispers didn't follow me physically, but I could still hear them in my mind. Every time I turned down another rural stretch, every time I slowed for a curve or a hidden driveway, I thought I heard a tap, a whisper, just beyond perception. The fog seemed to linger, clinging to the trees and fence posts like it was alive, like it was shaping itself around me. I radioed, and again, my voice shaky. Unit 3 reporting. Check the Henson property. Nothing visual, but there's something here. Not sure what. Over. Silence. Then static. No acknowledgement. Just static. My pulse raced. I tried to convince myself it was a communication error, a dead spot in the radio. But I knew better. Something had been there. Something was watching. I drove the route again, making loops, checking abandoned barns and old farmhouses. Each time, the taps came first, a rhythmic warning, then the whispers curling and fading in the fog. I could almost swear the whispers repeated what I thought, answering me, echoing my own fear back at me in a way that made my stomach churn. By 4 in the morning, the fog had thinned slightly, but the sense of unease never left. I parked at the station for a moment, doors locked, engine idling, trying to shake the feeling of being followed. My reflection in the rear-view mirror startled me, eyes wide, pale in the dim dashboard light, trembling hands still clutching the wheel. I couldn't explain what I had heard, what I had seen. The taps, the whispers, the feeling of something alive in the fog, marking me, observing me, and yet I knew I couldn't ignore it. Not fully, because whatever it wasn't done. It hadn't been finished. I filed the report later, careful with my wording. Activity noted, no visual confirmation. Probably wildlife. Probably a prank. Anything to keep it rational. Anything to keep myself sane. But I knew, deep down I knew, something had been there that night. Moving just beyond the light. Just beyond a reality I could control. Something patient. Something waiting. Even now, months later, I drive that stretch and remember the fog pressing close, the taps echoing, the whispers curling around me like smoke. I remember the figure I thought I saw in the corner of the barn, and I know, even if I never see it again, it's still there, waiting in the shadows, watching, knowing I'm awake. And I've learned that some things in the dark aren't meant to be chased, aren't meant to be confronted. They're meant to be acknowledged. They mark you and they follow. You can't outrun them. You can't forget. You just drive and hope they let you pass. I'd driven that highway 100 times, maybe more, but that night it felt different. The fog had rolled back just enough to let the headlights cut into the darkness, but not enough to show me everything. The black stretches between farmhouses and empty fields seemed to deepen with each mile, swallowing the car, swallowing me. Dispatch had been busy with routine calls, barking dogs, traffic complaints, a car broken down near the county line. But something kept pulling my attention to the road ahead. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that no matter how empty it looked, someone or something was following. I saw her first on the shoulder, a woman with a thumb out, jacket pulled tight against the cold. Normally, I'd slow, maybe stop, standard procedure, but something about her made me hesitate. She was pale in the headlights, too still, too perfect, like she had stepped out of a photograph into the night. Her eyes reflected the light unnaturally, almost like glass. I slowed anyway. "Evening, ma'am," I said, rolling down the window. "You need a ride?" She didn't answer at first, just stood there, the wind tangling her hair around her face. Then she whispered, almost too softly for me to hear, "Please help me." I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. The words were ordinary enough. Distress call, standard for a hitchhiker, but the tone, there was something hollow, something ancient about it, as if the voice carried years of waiting. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to sound casual. My hand rested on the door lock, ready to retreat. She tilted her head slightly, and the whisper came again, "Anywhere far from here." I hesitated. Normally, I wouldn't think twice, but the air felt heavier, thicker around her. I could almost see it, the fog wrapping around her like it belonged to her. And then the first doubt hit me. She hadn't stepped forward when I slowed. She hadn't tried to get in the car. She had only been there, on the edge of the light, almost drifting. I shook my head and drove past slowly, glancing in the rearview mirror. She didn't move. Not at all. Just stood there, and then she was gone, vanished. I swear to this day, I didn't see her leave. There was no footpath, no car, no trace. Just empty asphalt and fog curling across the shoulder. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was a trick of the headlights, a shadow, maybe a trick of fatigue. But then the radio crackled, a report from another unit. A vehicle had hit something or someone up the road. Emergency lights flashed briefly on the horizon. I picked up my radio, but before I could call it in, another voice came through. "Help me." The whisper made me freeze. Not from the radio. From somewhere behind the dashboard, inside the car, riding the hum of the engine. I glanced over my shoulder. Empty seats. Just me. I pressed on, but I couldn't focus. Every shadow in the fog seemed to stretch toward me. The empty field seemed alive, watching. I could feel movement at the edge of my vision, flickers of something I couldn't define. I turned the headlights toward the tree line, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure, dark and tall, pacing in time with the road. I blinked. Gone. Every call I answered that night blurred into the next. A deer reported on the side of the road turned into a child screaming for help. A car broken down near the old bridge became a vehicle abandoned, driver vanished. Every report seemed touched by the same strange quality. The panic was real, but the person, the presence, sometimes wasn't. Sometimes I felt them more than I saw them. And then I felt it, an almost imperceptible pressure behind the car, like the night itself had leaned in, pushing against the tires. My stomach tightened. The headlights couldn't cut through it. Nothing moved in my mirrors, nothing on the monitors, and yet the sensation persisted, creeping along the asphalt, following me, patient, silent, watching. I gripped the wheel tighter. My pulse drummed in my ears. I told myself to be rational, to think of wind, road sounds, fatigue. But my body didn't listen. Every hair on my neck stood on end. Every nerve screamed that I was not alone. I thought back to the woman on the shoulder, the first ghost of the highway. Something about her had lingered, as if she had hitched a ride in my mind, walked with me without stepping inside the car. The whispers followed her voice, drifting into every call, every shadow, every flicker of light. I reached the old bridge, a narrow span over a creek that reflected the faint glow of the moon. My headlights illuminated the road, but the mist hung low over the surface, curling and twisting. And then I heard it, a soft tap, tap, tap against the undercarriage. Something small, something deliberate. I slammed on the brakes, heart hammering. I looked underneath. Nothing, just the creek flowing beneath, silver and cold in the night. And yet the sound had been there. Not the water, not rocks. Something had tapped in time with my heartbeat. In rhythm with the whisper I still heard inside the car. I eased forward again, slow, every nerve taut. And then, ahead, I saw movement, shapes flickering in the fog, figures at the side of the road, pale and indistinct, almost mirages, but moving with purpose. A man, a woman, children? I couldn't tell. They didn't run. They didn't wave. They just followed, stepping in time with the road. I tried the radio. Dispatch, Unit 3. Multiple pedestrians. Unknown identity. Northbound. Requesting assistance. Static. Nothing else. Not a word of acknowledgement. Just silence. And then the whispers returned. Soft. Curling around the car. Drifting over the dash. Not through the radio this time. Inside my skull, I could hear fragments of my own voice, calling for help. Not just me. Others. Thousands of others. Merging into a chorus. I pressed my palms to my ears, desperate to shut out, but it persisted, echoing, pressing. I reached the county line. Streetlights began at the road again, and the fog thinned slightly, but the figures stayed. I glanced in the rear-view mirror. They seemed closer now, not walking, floating, always just beyond the reach of my headlights, moving in silence. I told myself I was hallucinating. Fatigue, stress, long hours, too much solitude. But then I saw the eyes, reflective, white, fixed on me, and one of the figures raised a hand, pointed directly at the car. I swerved slightly. It didn't move. The mist swallowed the hand, the figure, the shape entirely. And I realized I hadn't seen movement in the rear-view mirror before because it hadn't been there. It had been behind me, always behind me. I slammed on the brakes and pulled over to the shoulder, Shaking, sweat soaking through my jacket. My radio crackled again. A call came through, but the voice was distorted, merging with whispers. Words I couldn't understand. And beneath them, unmistakably, my own voice calling, pleading, lost in the fog. I tried to start the car again, to drive, to leave the stretch of road behind. But the engine hesitated, coughs and sputters. The whispers grew louder, not just in my ears, but all around me, pressing against the windshield, the doors, the dash. The fog pressed closer, curling over the car like it was alive, wrapping me in cold fingers I could feel, but not touch. And then I saw the first one again, the woman from the shoulder, standing in the middle of the road, arms outstretched, her hair drifting around her face. Pale, too still, too exact. The mist wrapped around her like it was part of her, and yet when I looked closer, she wasn't there, just the fog, curling and twisting, shaping itself into a memory, a warning. I floored the accelerator, tires screeching on wet asphalt. The mist followed, curling around the car, whispers chasing, voices overlapping, echoing in every reflective surface, every shadow. I didn't stop until the fog thinned completely, until I reached the next stretch of streetlights. I sat in the patrol car for a long time after, engine idling, shaking, trying to convince myself it had been imagination. But I knew better. I had felt the presence behind me, had heard the whispers echoing in the car. I had seen shapes that didn't belong in the real world. And most of all, I had felt the eyes, watching, patient, waiting. Even now, when I patrol that stretch of highway, I sometimes see figures in the fog. Sometimes I hear whispers behind the dash. Sometimes, I swear, I hear my own voice calling, pleading, and I know without doubt that something follows. Always, always waiting for the next car, the next driver, the next soul alone in the dark. It started around 2 in the morning, just after the quiet lull that always settles in during the graveyard shift. I had been sitting at the dispatch console, sipping coffee that had gone cold hours ago, staring at the same blinking monitors when the radio crackled, not the usual chatter of patrols, not the routine traffic reports. This was different, garbled, broken, static-ridden. At first, I thought it was interference, a glitch in the system. But there was something unmistakable in the sound, urgency. I leaned closer, ear nearly pressed to the speaker. The words were impossible to decipher at first, chopped up by static and hiss. There were fragments, broken syllables, a pitch that didn't match any human voice I knew. And yet there was intention, a cadence, a rhythm that suggested thought, even intelligence. Help! Here, please. I straightened up, my stomach twisting. My first instinct was to call it in to the sheriff, to warn him that I was picking up something unusual. But when I keyed the microphone, only static answered. Every outgoing line was dead. My voice bounced back to me faintly, distorted, almost as if it had been swallowed before it could leave. I tried tuning the frequency, scanning through every channel. Nothing. Normal patrol chatter, routine updates. And then it came again, louder this time, clearer, though still broken. Please don't leave. I froze. My fingers hovered over the controls. The words, garbled as they were, carried a desperation that sent chills crawling up my spine. Not a prank, not interference. Something, or someone, was trying to communicate. Something I couldn't see, couldn't locate, couldn't even understand fully. I tried to trace the origin. The equipment should have given me a reading, at least a rough estimate of the location, but the system showed nothing. Just static, blank, empty. It was as if the sound had no physical source, no point of origin. It wasn't coming from anywhere on the map, and then I realized it was responding to me. I spoke softly into the microphone, testing it. Unit 3, dispatch. Do you copy? The crackle answered immediately, almost impatiently. And through the static, I heard something unmistakable, my own voice, but warped, broken, crooked, calling back at me. Help, please, Unit 3. I staggered back from the console, heart hammering. I could hear it all around me, not just from the speaker, in the hum of the fluorescent lights, in the vibration of the monitors, in the soft clink of coffee cups on the desk. The voice wasn't just on the radio. It was inside the room, brushing against my skin, curling around my nerves. I told myself it had to be a glitch, equipment fault, overheating circuits. But that didn't explain the urgency, the human cadence, the recognition. It responded to my words. It mimicked me, twisted me, made my own voice a plea from somewhere else, somewhere beyond. I tried recording it, playing it back, but the moment I pressed play, the words warped again, rearranged into something else entirely. Fragments I hadn't heard before, go back alone, the static hissed and spat out sound that felt almost intelligible, like it was teasing me, letting me hear just enough to terrify me, but never enough to understand. I pressed the volume down, hoping to regain control. The next crackle was soft, almost intimate, a whisper through the speakers, garbled but deliberate. Here, waiting. I jolted. The air in the room felt heavier, colder. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to convince myself it was imagination. But it wasn't imagination. I could feel it, crawling in the vibrations of the radio, in the hum of the building itself. Something was here, something that knew I was listening, something that was aware. Minutes or hours passed like this. Every attempt to communicate with the signal was met with static fragments of words, whispers that sometimes sounded like people I had known, people had gone missing, voices I shouldn't recognize yet couldn't forget. Every repetition pressed harder on my mind, like the weight of unseen eyes watching through the walls. I thought about the missing, all the reports I'd filed over the months, the calls that had ended abruptly, people who had vanished without trace. And suddenly, the garbled messages on the radio didn't feel random. They felt like echoes, shadows of the lost, carried across the lines, pressing into the living. And now, somehow, I had become part of it. My own voice had joined the chorus. I told myself to breathe. I needed to think. I needed logic. Static couldn't hurt me. Voices couldn't hurt me. But the rational mind falters when the familiar is turned inside out. I had been trained for emergencies, for high-stress situations, for chaos. But this was neither chaos nor emergency. This was patient, watching, waiting. It wasn't temporal. It existed outside the rules I knew. I pressed the mute button. Silence. For a moment, it felt like relief. But then I realized the hum of the building was still whispering, faint, curling through the walls, shaping itself into my own voice, broken and pleading. I could feel it pressing against my ribs, coiling around my thoughts. I had not turned it off. It was everywhere. I tried stepping away, shaking my head, leaving the room for a moment, but the hallway felt alive. The ordinary sounds of quiet station, the faint drip of water, the buzz of lights, the hum of computers, twisted into rhythm with the static. I could hear the garbled calls, faint, teasing, moving with me. Wherever I went, they followed. I returned to the console, shaking, tried to regain control. I scanned every channel, cycled through every frequency, checked every piece of equipment, and every time the same result. Nothing on the monitors, nothing on the maps, nothing in the logs. And yet, the voice persisted, garbled, urgent, desperate, responding, calling, waiting. I remember closing my eyes, telling myself I would ignore it, pretending it wasn't happening. But when I did, I could hear it clearer than ever. My own voice calling, pleading, words I hadn't spoken aloud yet whispered back at me, echoes of fear I hadn't allowed myself to feel, yet pressed against me like an unseen hand. I could no longer tell where the sound ended, and I began. Every attempt to rationalize, to separate myself from the voices, failed. They knew me. They had learned my voice. They had learned my fear. And now they use it against me. Hours passed, or minutes. I don't know. Time lost all meaning. Every whisper, every crackle, every garbled phrase pressed deeper into my mind. My fingers ached from gripping the console. My vision blurred from staring at the static. And still, the voices called, pressed, whispered. I thought about leaving, walking out of the station, abandoning the equipment, abandoning everything. But I couldn't. Even if I left, I knew it would follow. This wasn't just sound. This was presence. Patient, aware, waiting. It had found me through the airwaves, through the lines, through the empty spaces of the station, and it wasn't done. By the time dawn crept over the horizon, spilling pale light into the room, I was slumped against the console, exhausted, trembling. The radio was quiet, at least audibly, but I could still feel it. Faint, curling at the edges of my thoughts, whispering to the hum of the station, carrying words I hadn't heard, voices of people I'd never met. I knew then that the static was alive, not in the sense of electricity, not in the sense of machinery, but alive in a way that could observe, imitate, and reach beyond the ordinary. It remembered the missing. It remembered me. And it would wait. Always, it would wait for the next shift, the next listener, the next lonely soul staring at blinking monitors in the dark. I never let the radio stay on alone again. I never listened to static without a plan to leave. And yet sometimes, late at night, when the station is quiet and the hum of lights is all that fills the air, I can still hear it. Faint, garbled, patient, waiting. And I know without question that it is listening for me, just as I am listening for it. I had driven past the old Thompson cornfield countless times, usually during routine patrols, and I always felt the same unease, the same itch in the back of my neck. There was something about that place, how the stalks rustled in the wind, how the fog seemed thicker there, how the dark swallowed everything but the road. But that night, I saw something I couldn't explain. It started with lights, pale, flickering, shifting across the rows of corn like they had a mind of their own. At first, I thought it was headlights from a distant car, someone driving along a hidden trail. But there was no road, no car, no sound, just those lights, moving erratically, weaving through the stalks as if guided by something unseen. I slowed my cruiser, gripping the wheel tighter. My flashlight rested on the dash, but I didn't need it yet. The cornfield glowed faintly from the lights themselves. I could feel my pulse in my temples. The air smelled damp, earth heavy, a little sweet, like rain on decaying stalks. I radioed in automatically, my voice betraying more tension than I intended. Dispatch, this is Unit 3. Reports of lights in the Thompson field. Investigating. No response. Only static. Not unusual at that distance. But tonight it made the silence feel heavier, as though the radio was holding its breath. I eased the car onto the shoulder, watching the lights flicker, skip, disappear, and reappear farther down the field. They weren't random. They moved with purpose, like someone or something was guiding them. A slow dance, deliberate and teasing. My stomach twisted. Something was in there. Something alive. I debated getting out. Every instinct screamed both yes and no. I wanted to see, to know, to confirm there was a rational explanation. But I also knew better. There's a difference between curiosity and recklessness. And a feeling this old cornfield had was pure, unfiltered wrongness. I leaned forward, peering through the windshield. The lights darted again, and I swear they paused when I blinked like they noticed me watching. I reached for the radio again. Dispatch, please confirm. A crackle cut me off. Just static. Then a whisper. So faint I almost didn't hear it. Here. I froze. My hand hovered over the mic. My heart thumped in my chest like a drumbeat. Too loud, too urgent. The whisper was human, but wrong. Thin, hollow, not carried through the air, but through my bones. It made my teeth ache to hear it. I shivered and rolled down the window, slightly. The damp night air crawling over my skin. My headlights stretched across the field, illuminating nothing. Not a figure, not a movement, not a sound. And yet the lights kept moving, skipping from row to row, darting toward the east corner of the field. I swallowed hard and started driving slowly along the shoulder, keeping my eyes on the cornfield. Every now and then, I caught glimpses of the lights ahead, then nothing. I thought maybe I had missed something, a car, a reflection, a camper. But no, the road was empty. The trees beyond the field were still, and the fog lay thick, curling between the stalks. A memory flashed in my mind, a story an old deputy had told me years ago about a family lost in the Thompson fields decades back, never found, last seen at night. He claimed the corn moved around them, hiding them from searchers. I told myself it was a story, folklore, rural nonsense. But tonight, the memory felt like a warning. The lights flickered again, closer this time, and my stomach dropped. I could feel the temperature drop around the car, a cold so sudden it made my fingers stiff. The lights darted along the edge of the field, just out of reach, teasing. Then, for the first time, I thought I saw a movement. Not a person exactly, more like a shadow skimming between the stalks. A figure too tall, too thin, bending in ways a human shouldn't. I slammed on the brakes. My foot hit the pedal too hard. The car skidded slightly on the gravel, sending a cloud of dust and the faint scent of wet soil into the air. My flashlight rested on the dash, but it felt useless compared to the pale, darting lights outside. I reached for the radio. Dispatch, Unit 3. There's movement in the Thompson field. Possible trespasser, need backup. No response, only static. I took a deep breath and eased the car forward, inch by inch, trying to get a closer look. The lights danced ahead, never stopping, always out of reach. And then as I drove, I noticed a sound, a whisper, soft, melodic, repeating, echoing. I recognized it instantly. It was laughter, children's laughter, high-pitched playful, but wrong, not joyful, hollow, empty. It didn't match the movements I saw. No one was there, yet the sound traveled around me, bouncing from stalk to stalk, curling into the car vents, brushing over my skin. I swallowed hard and tried to ignore it, trying to rationalize. Maybe someone was filming a prank. Maybe it was the wind carrying old recordings. Maybe I had finally lost it, my senses twisting in the fatigue of endless night patrols. But even as I tried, my stomach turned. Something was in that field. Something alive, something aware, something patient. I edged the car closer, heart thudding. The lights began to cluster in one spot, a small clearing in the corn. I could see stalks bending as if something was moving through them, shaping them, folding them over itself. I wanted to step out, to confront it, but my legs were suddenly leaden. Fear rooted me to the seat. And then, nothing. The lights vanished. The laughter stopped. The cornfield was still. The air held only the faint rustle of wind through dry stalks. The fog seemed thicker now, curling low to the ground, hiding every corner of the field. I sat there, hands on the wheel, eyes scanning every shadow. Silence pressed against me like a hand on my chest. I tried the radio again, hoping someone would break the silence. Anything, but only static responded. Even the monitors, tracking patrols, traffic, everything, showed nothing unusual. And yet, I knew the lights had been real, the whispers had been real, the presence had been real. I stayed there for a long time, engine idling, trying to convince myself it had been a trick of the headlights, a trick of the fog, imagination running wild in the middle of the night. But the feeling of being watched didn't leave. The hairs on my arms remained stiff, every nerve alive with a memory of movement I couldn't prove, sound I couldn't trace. Finally, I drove away, slowly, my eyes never leaving the field. I passed the edge of the corn, and the fog seemed to lift slightly, the night air settling into normalcy again. But the uneasy weight stayed. The field felt like it had exhaled after I left, and I couldn't shake the impression that it was waiting for me to return. By the time I reached the next stretch of streetlights, I realized something else. The silence that followed was worse than the lights, worse than the laughter. That absence of sound, of movement, of anything familiar, pressed against my mind in a way that made me shiver. Because the lights hadn't gone. They had only hidden. And whatever had been moving in those rows of corn was patient, waiting, watching. I parked back at the station, doors locked, engine idling, trying to calm myself. I replayed the night in my head, noting every flicker of light, every whisper of laughter, every impossible movement. I had no evidence, nothing to file, no patrol logs, no photographs, no traces. And yet, I knew it had been there. I knew it. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time my eyes closed, I saw lights flickering between the stalks. I heard laughter and the hum of the air vents. I felt the gaze of something tall, thin, impossible, pressing from the darkness of memory, and I knew that the Thompson field wasn't empty. It never would be. Even now, months later, I drive past it during daylight, and I can still feel the lingering pulse of that night. The corn is just corn. The road is just a road. But in my mind, the lights move still, darting between stalks, playful, deliberate, watching, waiting for someone foolish enough to stop, to look too closely, to notice. And I know, deep down, that one night, if I ever return after dark, they will be there. The lights, the presence, the impossible shapes, waiting for me to enter the field again, to hear the laughter, to see what shouldn't exist. Because some things in the dark do not belong to us. They simply wait, patient, watching, remembering. And once they know you, once you have seen, they never forget. The night had stretched longer than I ever remembered. Hours of empty roads, flashing headlights, strange lights in fields, and whispers that seemed to follow me wherever I went. My body was exhausted, my mind frayed. By the time dawn started bleeding into the sky, painting it in pale pinks and grays, I thought I could finally breathe, finally let the tension drain away. But I was wrong. I was alone in a patrol car, parked at the edge of a long, empty stretch of road that cut through farmland. My engine idled softly, a low hum that felt like a heartbeat. I ran my hands over the steering wheel, trying to shake the stiffness from my fingers. Every muscle ached, every nerve buzzed. The night had left its mark, a weight that didn't fade with the coming light. Then I heard it, a soft, deliberate voice, clear and unmistakable, calling my name. Sheriff. I froze. My hands tightened on the wheel. The hairs on my arms and neck stood on end. My first thought was a prank, a call from another unit. Someone tried to scare me after a long, lonely night, but the radio was dead. The patrol car's dash showed no transmissions, nothing on the scanner, and the voice didn't come from the speakers. It came from inside the car. Sheriff, come here. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my pulse pounded in my ears. I glanced around, scanning the back seat, the passenger seat, the floorboards. Nothing, just me, the car, and the lingering fog of night pressing against the windshield. I tried to rationalize. Fatigue, sleep deprivation, a trick of the mind after hours of isolation and tension. But the voice was persistent, intimate, deliberate. It carried the familiarity of someone I knew, or someone who knew me, saying my name, drawing me closer. I turned the ignition off, hoping the hum of the engine had been carrying the sound, giving it shape. But the moment I did, it grew louder, sharper, as if mocking my attempt to escape. Sheriff. I swallowed and reached for the door handle. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to grip the wheel first, then press against the door. I told myself to step out, to put space between me and the car, but the voice changed then, not in words, but in tone. It was insistent, patient, familiar, almost coaxing. Don't leave. I froze again, every instinct screaming to move, to flee. But the world outside the car was quiet. Too quiet. The fog clung to the ground, curling around fence posts and telephone lines. Birds were silent. The far-off hum of morning traffic was absent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I leaned back, trying to steady my mind, trying to find logic in the impossible. My radio had been dead all night, filled with static and garbled calls, voices that weren't there. Lights had moved across empty cornfields. Shadows had flickered at the edge of every dark stretch. Shapes too tall or thin or wrong to belong to this world. And now the voice inside my car, calling me by name. I tried speaking, forcing my voice to sound firm, normal. Who's there? No response. Only the soft echo of my own words, stretched and distorted, as if the car itself had swallowed them and whispered them back at me. I tried the radio again, flipping through channels. Nothing. Silence. Static. The kind of quiet that presses in on your skull until your thoughts echo back at you, amplified. Then the voice returned, softer, almost intimate. Sheriff, please. I could feel it in my chest now, not just my ears. A presence, tangible, pressing against the seat beside me, curling along the dashboard, My breath hitched. I reached for the flashlight on the console, swinging it around the interior of the car, every corner, every shadow. Nothing. Empty seats. Floor mats undisturbed. Nothing to explain the voice. I swallowed again, trying to force rational thought, trying to convince myself that fatigue had caught me, that it was a hallucination, a trick of the night. But deep down, I knew better. I had felt this before. In the fields, on the roads, over the radio. Something, or someone was here. Patient, aware, watching, waiting. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white, and took a slow, shuddering breath. I tried to start the car again, to drive, to leave, to put distance between me and whatever it was. But the engine refused. It coughed, sputtered, and then went silent, dead. The voice softened, low and coaxing, drawing closer, almost beside me now. "Sheriff, look." I dared to glance to the passenger seat. Empty. I leaned further, scanning the back. Empty. My own reflection stared back at me from the rear-view mirror, pale, haggard, wide-eyed. But in the corner of the mirror, just for a second, I thought I saw a shadow flicker, a shape, bending in ways it shouldn't. I slammed my eyes shut, shaking my head, trying to will it away. The sound persisted, though, brushing against my eardrums, curling around my skull. Not a scream, not a yell, just a whisper, familiar, intimate, impossible. "Sheriff." I bolted upright, fumbling for my phone. My fingers trembled so badly that I could barely grip it. Dialing 911 felt absurd, knowing full well that no one could help me with this, that no one could explain it. The line rang empty, then disconnected. Static. Silence. I looked back at the radio, at the dashboard, at the empty seats. The morning light was growing, gray and pale, stretching across the horizon. I felt relief at the dawn, at the normalcy it promised. But the presence didn't fade. It didn't go with the light. It lingered, wrapped in the air, pressing at me, a weight I could feel in my chest and stomach. I considered leaving the car, stepping onto the shoulder, putting physical distance between myself and the impossible. But something in me, fear, maybe something worse, kept me pinned to the seat. I couldn't leave. I couldn't move. Every instinct screamed to run, but my body refused. The whisper returned, clearer now, deliberate, almost impatient. "Sheriff, don't go." I realized then what terrified me most. It wasn't asking for help. It wasn't trying to warn me. It wasn't even testing me. It was claiming me. It was aware that I was listening, aware that I was alone, aware that I could not escape it. And in that awareness, I understood that I had been followed, hunted, observed through the night, through the fog, through the lights in the fields, through every call I had answered. I pressed my palms to my face, shaking my head, willing myself to wake up, to blink, to escape. But the voice persisted, curling inside my skull, brushing over my shoulders, pressing into my ears. I could feel the weight of it, patient, infinite, lingering like fog trapped in the car. Minutes or hours passed. I don't know. Time no longer made sense. Dawn had bled further into the sky, washing the horizon with pale light, but the presence did not weaken. The voice, insistent and hollow, followed me even in daylight, even in the hope of normalcy. And then, as the sun finally broke over the fields, spilling light across the road, I dared to look at the passenger seat one more time. Nothing, but the whisper lingered, curling around my thoughts. And in that moment, I knew it wasn't done. It would follow me to the station, back home, through sleep, through silence, patiently waiting for night to fall again, waiting for me to return to the road, to the fields, to the calls, to the radio, waiting for the moment I would hear my name again. I drove the last stretch to the station in silence, windows up, engine humming weakly. My hands never left the wheel. Every shadow along the road made me flinch. Every curve in the highway felt like a trap. By the time I parked and stepped out, the sun was fully up, pale and indifferent, spilling warmth across the asphalt. But the unease didn't leave. I felt in the pit of my stomach, a lingering brush of unseen fingers, a whisper I could almost hear if I listened too closely. I filed my last report, mechanical, neutral, as if nothing unusual had happened. Lights in the fields, empty roads, no activity found. Standard patrol, routine night. Nothing to see here. But I knew the truth. The truth was far stranger, far darker. The presence followed me home that day, I realized later. Not physically, not in the light, but in the mind, in the corners of vision, in the soft, insistent brush of sound that mimicked memory and thought. I could not shake it. I could not escape. It had touched me, imprinted itself, claimed a corner of my awareness that would never be free again. And I knew then what I had suspected for the last several nights, across fields, highways, and abandoned houses. The dark is a memory. The dark has a patience. It waits for the ones who notice. And once it knows your name, it does not forget. Even now, the memory of that final whisper echoes in my mind. Soft, intimate, deliberate, impossible. Not a threat, not a promise. Just a reminder. Sheriff, I remember the call star like any other. Just another lost hiker in the woods. It was late afternoon, and the air in the dispatch center had that heavy, recycled smell. The kind that makes your eyes sting after a few hours. My headset clicked, and I leaned back in my chair, trying to shake the stiffness in my shoulders. 911, what's your emergency? I said, as politely as I could manage, though I already had a sinking feeling about the time of year. Autumn leaves make the woods beautiful, but they also hide everything else. A voice came through, breathless, tense, panicked. Please? I don't know where I am. I've been walking for hours, and the voice cracked. I caught a whiff of desperation, even through the headset. I don't know. I can't find the trail. I typed in a few details while keeping him talking. A routine I've done hundreds of times. Okay, can you tell me your last known location? Any landmarks? I don't see anything familiar. There's just trees. So many trees. And the sun, it's going down fast. The words were jittery, uneven, like he was trying to make sense of a nightmare as it happened. I asked for GPS coordinates. Sometimes people panic and can't read them properly, but most modern phones give them automatically. A faint, static-laden silence followed. Then, here, it says 39.7392 north, 104.9903 west. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I had seen thousands of coordinates, but something about this one made my stomach tighten. I pulled up the map, ready to guide him to safety. The screen blinked, then my eyes widened. The location wasn't just off the trail. It wasn't even on any map I knew. No roads, no trails, nothing except an endless grid of dark green that stretched past the screen's edges. My heart beat faster, though I tried to steady my voice. Sir, can you confirm these coordinates? Yes, His voice trembled. I don't understand. I'm not near anything. There's just woods and shadows. They're moving. Shadows. I asked carefully, what do you mean, shadows? He swallowed audibly, and for a moment I thought he'd hung up. Then quietly he said, they move when I'm not looking, just at the edge of my vision. I keep thinking someone's following me, but I haven't seen anyone. Not really. I tried to ignore the chill that ran down my spine. Okay, just stay calm. Keep talking to me. Can you see the sun? Yes, it's low now. I think I walked in circles. Maybe I'm just tired. His voice broke. I glanced at the map again. The coordinates were impossible. According to every satellite feed, every map layer I could pull up, he was somewhere that shouldn't exist. Not just unmarked, but off-grid. If I were to drive there, I would end up in someone's living room, in a suburb, hundreds of miles from the woods he described. My mind fought to rationalize it, but every explanation sounded ridiculous. Sir, do you see anything else? Water? Rocks? A clearing? He hesitated. There's fog now, just fog, and it smells like dirt and moss, but wet like after rain. I don't see the sun anymore. It's gone. Fog can be thick in the late afternoon, I said. Stay in one place if you can. Can you find a large tree or something to stay near? He laughed quietly, a sound that didn't reach his eyes. Trees? There are only trees. So many trees. Every direction, it's all trees. And they're whispering. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Whispering, my mind tried to dismiss it. Some people talk to themselves when they're scared. But the way he said it, it made the hair on my arms rise. Whispering how? I asked carefully, keeping my voice steady. I don't know. Words, maybe? I can't understand. But it feels angry, watching me. He paused, swallowed, then whispered so low I almost didn't catch it. It knows I'm alone. I frowned, leaning closer to the headset. Sir, you're not alone. I'm right here. Listen, keep talking to me. Can you describe anything around you? Even something small. He took a shaky breath. Branches twisted. Some look like arms. Twisting, bending. The ground, it's soft, like it's breathing. I feel dizzy. I can't. A pause. Then I think I see a path. A path, maybe? But it doesn't look right. Straight lines, but wrong. Like it's too straight. Too perfect. I typed rapidly, searching for trails in that area. Nothing. Not a single path. Sir, can you describe it again? It's glowing. Just a little. Not like lights, but like the trees themselves are shining. And the fog moves along it like it's alive. I don't want to go down it, but maybe I have to. I swallowed, though it felt like sand in my throat. Don't move. Stay where you are. I'm sending help. He laughed again. Low, dry. Help? No one can help me. They can't even find me. Look at my coordinates. Look where I am. I stared at the screen, the number still blinking. My hand shook slightly, but I forced myself to type in a rescue request. Standard protocol. Emergency responders. But I knew, deep down, there was no protocol for this. No GPS in the world would match what he was telling me. Sir, stay calm. Keep talking. Can you hear anything else? Any sounds? Yes, footsteps. Not mine. Behind me. Soft, crunching leaves. But I look, and there's nothing. Just trees. Always trees. And the fog moves. His voice cracked. I can't stand it. I can't think straight. I tried to steady my breathing, though my chest felt tight. Breathe. You're okay. Just slow breaths. In, out. I need you to focus. Can you make a mark on the ground? A rock. A branch. Something to know where you are. There was silence for a long moment. Then I tried, but it disappears. Everything I touch disappears after I let go. The ground, it swallows it. I don't understand. I froze, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. I forced myself to type the coordinates into another mapping program, cross-referencing, triple-checking. Nothing. Every result was the same. Sir, it's going to be okay, I said, though my own voice sounded hollow. I need you to find a tree, any tree, and stay near it. Don't follow any paths. Don't go toward any light. He whispered, almost himself, it's coming. I can feel it. Watching. Smiling. Waiting. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the desk. Stay on the line. I need you to describe it if you see it. Keep talking. I'm right here. A pause. Then, in a whisper that sent ice through my veins, I think I see a person. A man, but wrong. Too tall. Arms too long. Face. I can't see it, but I feel it. I can't move. I'm stuck. Sir, stay calm. Don't look at it. Just breathe. Keep describing. Keep talking to me. I can't. I think it's behind me. Watching. Waiting. I hear it laughing. But it's not a laugh. Not real. Something wrong. The line went silent. Static hissed through the headset. I pressed buttons, called back, tried everything. Nothing. The screen still blinked his impossible coordinates, mocking me. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding, staring at the numbers. 39.7392 north, 104.9903 west. Somewhere that shouldn't exist. Somewhere that no one could reach. somewhere where the forest was alive, whispering, watching, waiting, and I knew, somewhere deep in the hollow part of my chest, that he hadn't imagined it, because even now I could feel it, watching me, through the wires, through the screens, through the air that smelled faintly of moss and wet dirt, waiting. The call ended, but the forest didn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest itself had taken over the call. After the first one ended, after the line went dead, I kept staring at the coordinates, my hands trembling slightly. Every instinct told me this wasn't normal. And yet, hours later, when another call came through from the same number, I answered it without thinking. Hello. My voice sounded small in the dispatch center, swallowed by the hum of computers and the faint, mechanical breathing of the ventilation system. Please don't leave me. The voice was quieter this time, hesitant, almost reverent. My chest tightened, that same trembling, panic tone. It's closer. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of my desk. I'm here. You're not alone. Tell me what's happening. There was a long silence. Then, a sound that made me flinch, a low, drawn-out creak, like the branches above him bending too far. I hear echoes everywhere, not voices, or maybe voices, but wrong. They're twisted. My mind, but not mine. I swallowed, forcing myself to stay calm. Echoes. I ask, can you describe them? They repeat me, my words, my steps, my mistakes. He whispered it like a confession. Every step I took today, I hear it behind me. I try to ignore it, but it knows, and the shadows, they move with it. I typed rapidly, trying to track him. The GPS blinked the same impossible numbers. I tried sending instructions. Move toward the clearing. Follow the mossy log. Stay calm. Don't run. Don't tell me what to do, he said sharply, panic rising in his tone. I can't see anything. Just darkness, moving. I try to describe landmarks. Tall tree with 3 broken branches. Do you see it? Yes, but it moves when I blink. I swear it moves. His voice caught. Everything moves. The ground, the trees are alive. I leaned closer to the headset, heart hammering. My words came out steadier than I felt. Listen to me. Focus on one thing. Can you see the sky? Sky. He laughed softly, but it wasn't humor. It was horror. No, just fog, always fog. Gray, thick, and the echoes. I hear my own voice calling me, crying for me, but I'm the only one here. I think I don't know what I'm doing. I felt a cold sweat form along my spine. Sir, I need you to focus. Can you touch the ground? Something solid. Yes. Rocks. Mud. But it slips through my fingers, like the earth itself rejects me. I don't understand. And the shadows. They're closer now. I can feel them. Watching. Waiting. Laughing. Not human. Not real. I swallowed. My stomach twisted. Stay on the line. Keep talking. Don't follow the shadows. Don't. They flit past the radio, he interrupted, voice trembling so hard it broke. I hear it in the static. Whispering, laughing, mocking me. Every time I try to move, it twists the path. I walk in circles. I'm lost. I'm lost forever. I typed, searching for every path, every trail. Nothing. Just endless green, dense, and unmarked. The thought crawled under my skin. Maybe the forest didn't obey maps. Maybe it never did. Sir, focus on one thing. Pick a tree. Stay near it. Don't move. I'm here. I tried. I try. But the echoes, they follow me. Every word I speak. Every breath I take. They repeat it. They mock it. And the trees, oh God, the trees, they bend when I look away. They stretch. Sometimes I swear I see faces in them. Faces screaming, watching, waiting. My throat went dry. I couldn't imagine being that alone, that unmoored from reality. Sir, you're safe with me. Keep talking. Don't panic. Focus on me. Tell me. Tell me what you see right now. Nothing. Fog. Trees. Shadows. And movement. Always movement. But when I look, there's nothing. Just emptiness. And the echoes. They never stop. I can hear myself calling for help, crying, screaming. I'm screaming right now. And they scream with me. They are me. And not me. I close my eyes for a second, breathing deeply. Listen, I need you to take one step back. Slowly. Feel the ground. Can you do that? Yes. Yes, but, he gasped. The shadow, it moved. I swear, I didn't move my head. It flinched, twisted, smiled. Oh God, it smiled. It knows I see it. My hands tightened around the headset. Sir, I need you to remember, this is real. You're not imagining it. Keep your steps slow, one at a time. Don't let it guide you. He whimpered. I can't stop it. I can hear whispers in my own voice. I hear my own fear, and it's alive, laughing, waiting, twisting. I force myself to type coordinates into the rescue software again, triple checking, praying for an answer. Nothing. Just endless green, a forest that shouldn't exist. And I could almost hear it, through the static of the line, through the hiss and crackle, the mocking laughter trees. I see something, he whispered. A figure in the fog, just standing, watching, not moving, but moving. I can't describe it. Its arms too long, its legs bending wrong, and the head, no face, just darkness where it should be. I swallowed hard. Do not approach it. Move away slowly. Don't let it see you. But it follows, always, in the echoes. I hear in the radio, in the static, my own voice screaming at me, every word, every step, every breath. My stomach twisted. I could feel it too, in the room, through the wires, through the soft on the computers, watching, waiting, twisting reality just a little too far. Sir, you see anything else? Any landmarks? Anything you can hold on to? Nothing. The ground shifts, rocks, dirt, leaves, they dissolve when I touch them. I can't stay anywhere. I keep walking, always walking. The shadows, they twist my path. I think I'm walking in circles. Oh God. I lean closer, gripping the desk. Stay with me. You're not alone. Keep talking. Don't listen to the whispers. Keep describing everything. I need it. I need to know where you are. They're closer. I hear steps behind me. I turn, nothing. I look away and it's closer. Breathing, watching, waiting, mocking me. I can feel it. Its presence, twisting. I can't stop shaking. I can't think. The fog, it's swallowing me. I swallowed, trying to ground myself. One step at a time. One breath at a time. You're not alone. I'm here. Focus on my voice. I see the path again, he whispered, voice faint, trembling. Straight. Too straight. Perfect, but wrong. I want to follow it. I have to, or the shadows, the echoes. No, don't follow it. Stay put. Stay where you are. The fog, it shifts. It moves. It bends the trees. It twists the path. It wants me to follow. He trailed off, whispering so faintly I almost didn't hear it. I think it's smiling at me, waiting, always waiting. I sat back, silent, listening to the faint hiss of static. The coordinates still blinked, the impossible green forest on the map. The radio felt heavy in my hand, heavy with presence, heavy with something alive, something mocking, something patient. The call ended again, but the echoes remained. I could still hear them, in the static, in the hum of the computer, in my own voice when I whispered to myself, always repeating, always mocking. And I knew the forest hadn't let him go. I remember the moment the line went dead, like it was a physical blow. 1 second, his voice was there, panicked, trembling, barely holding on to reality. And the next, nothing. Just static. Hissing, crackling, mocking static. I pressed the buttons, called back, tried to reconnect, but there was only silence. For a while, I thought maybe it was a drop signal, a dead spot in the forest. Phones fail in the woods all the time, but this wasn't a normal forest. Not the kind I'd ever dealt with before. Not anywhere near the coordinates that still blinked on my screen like a cruel joke. I sat back in my chair, staring at the numbers. 39.7392 north, 104.9903 west. Impossible. Nothing was there. Nothing except green that stretched forever, unmapped, untouchable, like the forest had eaten it before humans could see it. My stomach knotted. My fingers shook as I tried to type a new rescue request. Tried to get anyone to respond. But every call, every attempt to triangulate the signal, failed. The line was dead. I went through the logs again, hoping, praying that I had made a mistake. Maybe I misread the GPS. Maybe it wandered into a normal map trail, and I was panicking for nothing. But every piece of data matched the impossible. Nothing fit, and I could feel it. Somehow that presence, watching, waiting, twisting reality like a reflection in water. Hours later, my supervisor came by. She asked what happened. I told her the facts as best I could. Lost hiker. Coordinates impossible. Line ended in static. She frowned. "He'll turn up," she said. But I knew she was saying it to comfort herself, not me. I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest had swallowed him, that the echoes, the shadows, the twisting trees had claimed him in a way no human could reach. Later, I reviewed the recording. I thought maybe hearing it again would help me make sense of it, but it didn't. The static was worse than the silence. Not empty, full of voices, whispers, laughter, faint footsteps that weren't mine, stretching and bending around the edges of the headset. I could hear him in it too. Or maybe it was me. His fear, his panic, echoed in my own chest like it had never left. I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. The trees that moved when he blinked, the fog that shifted and swallowed everything, the shadows that flitted past the radio, mocking him, how real it felt to him, and maybe how real it was. The thought lingered, gnawing at me. What if the forest wasn't just a place, but a thing? Something alive, patient, waiting for people to get lost inside it? I called the local rangers. I explained the coordinates, the situation, the static. They checked. They reported back. No hiker, no tracks, nothing unusual, just normal forest. And yet, I knew that was impossible. I could almost hear the whispers now, low in the hum of my office, in the soft buzz of the fluorescent lights. I could almost feel the shadows brushing against my skin. Waiting. I thought about the voice on the line, how he described the echoes in his own voice, the way every word he spoke repeated in the forest, twisted and mocking. I could hear them now, faintly in my memory, like a recording warped and stretched too thin. His fear wasn't just his own. It had attached itself to me, to the room, to the air. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't. And the coordinates. I couldn't stop looking at them. 39.7392 north, 104.9903 west. I plotted them again, watched the blinking dot on the map. Tried every method, every software, every satellite layer. Nothing. Just a green void. A place that shouldn't exist. I wondered what he had seen in that forest. What had followed him. And I hated myself for wondering if it had ever been human at all. I couldn't forget the sound of his voice breaking the first time he heard the shadows laugh. Not a real laugh. A wrong laugh. The kind that gets under your skin and makes your teeth ache. The kind that lingers after silence has returned. I remember the way he whispered, almost to himself, "It's smiling, always waiting." And I remembered feeling it, too, through the static, through the screen, as if the forest was in a room with me. I kept checking back over the days. Every call attempt, every report, every coordinate cross-check. Nothing. They classified it as a missing person case. They eventually closed it after weeks of no leads. But I knew he hadn't just disappeared. Not into thin air, not into a normal forest. He had vanished into something else entirely. Something patient. Something alive. Sometimes late at night, I think I can hear the faintest echoes of his voice on the line. Just a whisper, low and desperate, curling around the edges of the static. I tell myself it's just my mind playing tricks, but the hair on my arms rises, and I swear I can feel him, or what took him, brushing past the edge of my perception. Watching, waiting, always waiting. I try to convince myself it's impossible. A human can't vanish into nothing. A forest can't twist coordinates, bend reality, hold a person hostage. And yet, I remember the way he described the fog, moving and breathing. The trees, twisting when he blinked. The shadows flitting past the radio signal, like they were alive. The voice repeating his own words, mocking him. And I know that wasn't imagination. Not for him. Not for anyone who ever touches that place. The memory of that call haunts me. The way he begged. The way his voice cracked and then disappeared. The static that swallowed him whole. Every word he spoke, repeated in the echoes, lingering in my mind like a curse. I replayed the recording countless times. Every time, I hear him a little differently. Sometimes closer, sometimes farther. Always panicked, always alone, always gone. I've thought about going there myself. To those coordinates, to the forest that doesn't exist. But I don't, not yet, because I know if I step into it, even for a moment, I might never come back. And I can't bear the thought of leaving behind only static. So I sit at my desk, staring at the impossible numbers, watching the green void on the map, wondering if he's still out there, wandering, if he's still hearing the echoes, if the shadows are still twisting the path beneath his feet, waiting. Sometimes I imagine the moment he realized he was never going to find a way out, that final understanding that the forest, the fog, the shadows, they had claimed him, and in that imagining, I feel his fear like a pulse in my chest. A cold, slow, patient pulse. The case file sits in a drawer now, but I keep it open sometimes. I read the reports, check the coordinates again, even though I know there's nothing to check. I listen to the recording, and sometimes, just sometimes, in the softest of static, I swear I hear him, calling for help, but never found. I remember getting the call just after midnight, that low, tired hum of the radio, that usually meant someone was drunk or a dog was barking too loud. Disturbance reported at the Miller place, out on Old Hollow Road. Isolated farmhouse. My stomach sank just a little. Isolated meant trouble, and trouble out there didn't come with backup, not for miles. The drive was quiet, the headlights cutting through the darkness, the trees on either side leaning in like they wanted to hear me pass. I could hear the tires crunching over gravel, and I kept telling myself it was just a routine check. Nothing unusual, nothing to get my nerves tied up over. But the road had that kind of silence that pressed on you, soft and suffocating, and I couldn't shake it. When I pulled up, the farmhouse was dark, empty. Even from a road, I could see the windows staring back like blank eyes. The front door was shut, no lights, no movement. The kind of silence that makes you notice every small thing. The wind rattling the old shutters, the low groan of the porch boards, the soft skitter of something in the weeds. I stepped out, hand hovering over my radio, the other on the grip of my flashlight. The air smelled sharp, cold, and damp, the kind that gets in your lungs and settles there, heavy. Sheriff's office. I called out, my voice breaking quiet. Nothing, just the wind answering back, whispering through the trees. I went around to the back. Same story. No lights, no signs of life, and nothing that explained why someone would have called it in. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Not the usual routine trouble. Not a missing animal or a drunk neighbor. This felt different. Off. Wrong in a way I couldn't name. I checked the side door, jiggled the handle. Locked. I ran my fingers along the peeling paint, and it felt sticky, like it had absorbed too many years of rain and dust and something else I couldn't place. A smell hit me then, faint, earthy, almost metallic. I shook my head. Probably just the old house. That's all it was. I circled back to the front porch, shining the flashlight along the windows. One of them was cracked open a little, just a sliver. The beam fell across the floor inside. Empty. Dust motes floated lazily in the light, disturbed only by the wind sneaking through the crack. I could hear the faint creak of a floorboard, or maybe it was just the house settling. Maybe I radioed in. Sheriff here. Miller Place. No one inside. House looks abandoned. I waited for confirmation, tapping my foot on the porch. But the static was loud. Static and silence. Just like the house. I decided to go inside. I knew better. I knew it was stupid. But that kind of curiosity, you can't fight it. The door creaked like it hadn't been opened in years. Dust rose in little clouds as I stepped inside. The floor was solid, but every step echoed in the empty house. The kind of echo that makes your own heartbeat sound loud. The living room was empty, furniture draped in sheets, as if someone had left in a hurry decades ago. I swept the flashlight around. Nothing. No signs of a struggle. No footprints. No movement. Just quiet. Too quiet. I felt my chest tighten. My radio buzzed faintly, the only sound that didn't belong. I shook it off. Old electronics always hum, especially in these old houses. I moved to the kitchen. Dust on the counters. The sink dry and cracked. Cabinets closed. No food. No dishes. No sign anyone had been here recently. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I couldn't place why, but the air felt heavier here, like it was holding its breath. I tried to shake it, tell myself it was just an old house, empty for years. Then I heard it, just a faint sound. A whisper, maybe. I froze, heart hammering. I held my breath. Nothing, probably just the wind. That's what I told myself. The wind through a cracked window, the old was settling. My flashlight beam jittered across the room. I checked the windows. All shut, except the one at the front, cracked open. Wind couldn't make a whisper like that. Not like a human voice. I moved toward the stairs. The sound followed me, faintly, just out of reach. A whisper again. Not words I could understand. Not even language. Just sound, like a breath held too long. I gripped my flashlight tighter. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to get back to the car, to call for backup. But I couldn't. Something made me keep moving. The upstairs landing was dark, the beam of the flashlight cutting through shadows that didn't make sense. They leaned wrong. The corners seemed deeper than they should be. I stepped cautiously, every step creaking under me. And then I noticed the room at the end of the hall. The door was ajar, just a little, and the whisper seemed louder there. My skin prickled. I pushed the door open slowly. Empty. Nothing inside. The floorboards bare. A single chair tipped over, as if someone had been sitting, then stood quickly, but no one was there. My breath came faster. The whisper had stopped, or maybe it had moved. I couldn't tell. I checked each room. Empty. Closets. Bedroom. Small bathroom. Nothing. I felt a hollowness growing in my chest, a cold realization. The farmhouse was empty, but not normal empty. Not abandoned empty. Wrong empty. Like someone had been here, just left, but had never existed at all. I called in again. Sheriff here. House is empty. No signs of anyone. My voice sounded strange to me. Small, uneasy. I repeated it. Checked my radio. Static. Static and silence. No one answered. I tried again. Still nothing. The line felt heavier, like it resisted my words. Then I heard it again. Soft, almost under the hum of the old house. A whisper, faint, coming from behind me. I spun. Nothing. Just walls and shadows. My flashlight cut across the room. Dust floating. Sheets draped over furniture. Empty. I took a deep breath. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe it was my imagination. That's what everyone would have said. But I knew the feeling. That shiver creeping up your spine when something watches. When something is just wrong. I went back downstairs. Every step felt wrong. Too loud. I shook my head, trying to focus. Maybe the house was settling. Old houses make noises. Wind makes noises. Shadows make noises if you let your imagination wander too far. I stepped onto the porch again. The night was quiet. Too quiet. No wind. No leaves rustling. Just silence. I radioed in. Sheriff leaving the Miller place. House is empty. No one here. The radio buzzed. Just static. Hissing. Low mocking. I hit the button again. Nothing. I shook the device. No one. Just the sound of the static fading slowly, leaving the night heavier than it had been before. I walked back to my car, the gravel crunching under my boots. The headlights cut through the dark trees, long shadows stretching across the road. I didn't look back. I couldn't, but I felt it, that watching, that presence, waiting just beyond the tree line. Not alive, not human, not natural. I drove back to town in silence. The radio stayed off. The thought of that farmhouse stayed with me. Empty, wrong, and whisper in a way no human voice should. And I knew, if someone had been there, they weren't gone the way we understand gone. They were taken, absorbed, erased. Back at the station, I filed the report. Routine disturbance. Nothing found. Just an old farmhouse. Just shadows and whispers. But I couldn't forget it. Not the silence. Not the way the corners of the room seemed deeper than they should be. Not the faint whisper that followed me out into the night. Like a breath held too long, waiting for me to notice. I still think about that call, even now. Sometimes, late at night, I can hear in my mind the soft creak of a floorboard, the faint hiss of a whisper, the weight of something watching from just beyond the edges of the light. And I wonder if it's still there, waiting, always waiting. And I know one day it might call again. I went back the next morning. The farmhouse had been quiet when I left, just shadows and whispers lingering in my mind. But daylight didn't make it better. In fact, it made the house feel heavier, more patient, like it was waiting for me to notice. I parked my car in the gravel driveway, the crunch echoing across the empty field. The sun had just started to burn through the mist that hung over Old Hollow Road. Everything looked innocent enough in daylight. The trees swayed lazily. Birds called in the distance. But I knew better. I always do. The first thing I noticed was the footprints. Fresh footprints. Small, messy, half-smeared, leading from the back door around to the front porch. I stepped closer, my boots crunching on the damp grass. No one should have been here. No one lived out here. And there were no cars, no signs of a visitor. Just me. The prints were human, but wrong. They didn't match any gait I knew. They staggered slightly, uneven, like the person, or whatever, was moving with hesitation, dragging something, or maybe being dragged themselves. I shivered, brushing a bead of sweat from my forehead. Though the morning was cool, I followed them carefully to the porch. The door was still shut. I shone my flashlight along the edges of the doorframe, though the sun already flooded the porch. Nothing. No fingerprints. No signs of break-in. Just a footprint ending at the threshold, as if whoever or whatever was here had simply vanished. I radioed the station. Sheriff here. Footprints at the Miller place. Fresh. No sign of anyone. Copy. Static. Nothing. I pressed again. Static. Then a faint hiss, like a whisper curling around the edges of the radio. Just for a second, my hand tightened on the device. I told myself it was nothing. Old radios make noise. I've heard it 100 times. But it felt wrong. Inside the house, the air was thick, heavy in a way the sunlight couldn't reach. I moved cautiously through the living room. Dust had settled again, though faint traces of the footprints seemed to shimmer in the light. Impossible shadows that didn't make sense. I checked the floorboards. Nothing, but I could feel it. That presence again. Watching, waiting, patient. I went to the kitchen, moving the flashlight slowly over counters, cupboards, the cracked linoleum. A cold draft brushed past me, though all the windows were shut. I froze, gripping the flashlight. Then, from the far corner of the room, a door slammed shut. Hard, sharp, echoed in my chest. I jumped, spinning. Nothing. Empty kitchen. Silent again, except for the faint hum of the morning wind outside. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice sounded small. Hollow. No answer. Not even the usual birds or insects. Just the silence. And something else. That soft weight in the air, brushing the back of my neck. The feeling of eyes I couldn't see. I tried to reason. Maybe the wind caught a door just right. Maybe the house shifted, old hinges settling. I told myself that. I repeated it in my head over and over. But deep down I knew that wasn't what happened. The slam was deliberate, intentional, and I wasn't alone. I moved to the stairs. Step by step, careful listening. Each creak of the old wood sounded louder than it should. I reached the landing. The air changed. Colder, denser, a soft whisper again, barely audible, curling along the walls. I held my breath, my hand pressed against the railing. I couldn't see anything. Nothing moved. Nothing. Yet I felt it. That presence. Watching. Twisting. Waiting. The room at the end of the hall was closed. The door shut tight. I approached slowly. The whisper grew just a little louder, like someone breathing softly, right behind my ear. I reached for the doorknob. My hand paused. The air inside the room felt wrong. Denser, heavier, almost wet. My stomach twisted. I opened it anyway. Empty. Just a bedroom. Draped furniture, cracked walls, dust in the corners. Nothing. No signs of anyone ever being there. I took a cautious step inside. The floorboards groaned under me. A door to the small closet shifted slightly, creaking, and then slammed. Hard. I jumped back, breathing fast. My flashlight cut across the room. Empty. Nothing. I backed out slowly, eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The whispering stopped. The room was silent, but I could feel it. Something had been there. Something unseen, watching me, waiting for me to notice. I swallowed, trying to calm my shaking hands. Old houses make noises. Empty rooms settle. Shadows move with the light. I repeated it to myself, but it was hollow, unconvincing. Back downstairs. The front door I had left shut the night before creaked open slightly. The wind? Impossible. The air was still. No breeze. I approached cautiously. The door swung gently on its hinges, almost inviting me out. My hand hovered over the handle. I didn't touch it. Not yet. Not today. I radioed in. Sheriff here. Signs of presence inside the Miller place. Doors moving, slamming. No one here. Static again. Then a faint hiss, a whisper, and the feeling of breath on the back of my neck. I spun. Empty hallway. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud, frantic, betraying me. I went back through the house methodically. Every room, every closet, every corner. Dusty, abandoned, untouched by life, except for the prints outside. Those footprints I couldn't explain. And now the doors, moving as if something unseen had passed through. I didn't see it. I didn't hear it. But I felt it. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to drive away, to call for backup. But I stayed. I had to. Curiosity and duty tangled together, sharp and insistent. I moved to the back porch. The sunlight had grown stronger, but shadows still clung to the corners of the yard, long and waiting. I checked the ground. The footprints were gone, vanished like the person or thing that had left them had simply dissolved into the earth. My stomach turned. Something was here, moving in ways I couldn't understand, vanishing at will. The radio crackled faintly. Not a call, not a word, just static, low and deliberate, curling in the room, around the walls, around me. I shook it off, gripping it tightly. My hands were clammy. I told myself it was a glitch. Machines make noise. Electronics hum. Static is normal. But the hair on my arm stayed raised. I could feel it. Something watching. Waiting. I went back inside. Every step felt wrong. Echoing too loudly. Carrying through the empty house like a warning. The living room was unchanged. Dusty, draped furniture. Shadows stretching where they shouldn't. I shined my flashlight along the walls. The beam wavered slightly, though my hands were steady. The corners seemed wrong. Too deep, too dark. I swallowed hard. I checked the kitchen again. The cabinets remained closed, counters empty, sink dry and cracked. But the air had shifted. Cold, heavy, watching. I felt a presence behind me, soft, patient, deliberate. I spun. Nothing. Just shadows, dust, silence. But I knew it was there, waiting, twisting. I called out, "Anyone here?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the old house. No answer. Not even the wind. Not even the floorboards. Silence. Thick, patient silence that pressed in around me. I went upstairs one last time, each step echoing unnaturally. The whispers were back, faint, curling around the walls. I reached the landing. The room at the end of the hall, the one that slammed its door before, stood shut again. I hesitated. My flashlight trembled slightly. I could feel the weight of it, the pressure in the air. That room held something. Something patient. Something unseen. I stepped inside. Empty. Dusty. Shadows clinging to the corners. But the air felt wrong. Alive almost. Breathing. The closet door creaked open. Slowly. Then slammed shut. Hard. I jumped, gripping my flashlight. Nothing. Empty. But the sense of being watched, of being waited for, lingered. I left the farmhouse eventually. Daylight, I told myself. Sunlight. Safe. But as I walked to my car, I kept glancing back. The windows stared blankly. The shadows clinging, twisting in ways they shouldn't. The house waited. Silent. Patient. Unseen. Unforgiving. And I knew I would never be able to stop thinking about it. Not the footprints. Not the doors. Not the whispers curling around the edges of reality. Just out of reach. Something had been here. Something that didn't belong. Something that watched and waited. I drove away, leaving the farmhouse behind. But it wasn't gone. I could still feel it. In the back of my mind, in the weight of the air, in the softest of static that seemed to follow me even on the highway. Waiting. Patient. Twisting. And I knew it wasn't finished. It was just after 3 in the morning when the line came through. The 911 dispatcher's voice was calm on the other end, professional, routine, but I knew better. I could feel it even before I picked up. That kind of static that scratches at the edges of your thoughts. The kind that makes your teeth ache if you listen too closely. 911, what's your emergency? I asked, leaning back in my chair, glancing at the clock. There was a pause. Then a whisper. Soft. Low. Terrified. Someone is in the house. The voice was human. Trembling panic, but faint. Barely there, like it was coming from underwater. My stomach sank. I didn't know which house. Nothing on the line gave me a location. Sir? Ma'am? Where are you calling from? I asked, keeping my tone steady. The whisper cracked. The house, the old farmhouse. Old Hollow Road. My chest tightened. The Miller place. My hand tightened around the phone. I remember the empty rooms, the moving doors, the footprints, the whispers that followed me like shadows in daylight. My pulse quickened. You're sure? That's abandoned. I said, yes. The voice whispered, almost pleading. Someone inside, watching, waiting. I grabbed the dispatch maps, tracing the call. My fingers hovered over coordinates I already knew too well, and then the impossibility hit me. The call was coming from the farmhouse itself. Every trace, every triangulated ping, every signal pointed to the abandoned house. My stomach twisted. That was impossible. Phones don't work when they're off, unplugged, empty, and that house had no power. No one lived there. No one had been there. Yet here was a human voice, trembling, real, coming from within its walls. I radioed backup. Sheriff here. 911 report. Someone in the Miller place. Tracing line confirms it's coming from the house itself. Coordinates match the property. Repeat, coordinates match the Miller place. Static. My own voice echoed faintly, distorted by the hum of the radio. Then another whisper, softer this time, almost laughing. They won't leave. I can't leave. I froze. My hand gripped the phone tighter. The hair on my arm stood on end. That voice, it wasn't me. It wasn't anyone else I'd ever heard, and yet it felt painfully human, full of fear, full of something else, something waiting. I tried to talk to it. Sir? Ma'am? Can you describe what's happening? What do you see? A pause, then a whisper. Shadows moving, doors slamming. Can't they follow me? Always. The same thing I had felt, the same sense of presence that clung to that house like a living thing. My mouth went dry. I couldn't tell if I was listening to someone alive or the house itself speaking through them. The words carried panic, but they also carried something else. Deliberate, patient, watching. I tried to reason. You need to leave. Leave the house. Get out now. I can't. The voice cracked. Desperation. Exhaustion. I can't. Static surge over the line. Sharp, twisting. Then the whisper again. They wait. Always waiting. Don't move. I traced the coordinates again. Triple checked them. The farmhouse. Empty. No one. No power. No phone line. And yet there it was. That voice. Whispering fear into my mind. Threading around the edges of the radio. Curling along the walls of the station. Brushing my thoughts like a cold finger. I told the dispatcher at the other end to get the Rangers out there immediately. My hands were shaking as I repeated the details. Abandoned farmhouse. Old Hollow Road. Someone's inside. Line traced to the property. Back up now. Static hissed back. Longer this time, like it was breathing. The whisper returned. They follow. See me. I could hear in my own thoughts. Not just the radio. Not just the faint, trembling voice. Something had slipped into my mind. Soft, low, insistent. Patient. Waiting. Twisting. The Rangers were on their way. I stayed on the line, trying to keep the voice talking. Can you describe what they look like? The person inside? No answer. Just soft static, curling around the edges of the line. Then a whisper, almost inaudible, so close it felt like it was right behind my ear. I am them now. I froze. My hands gripped the phone. That wasn't a person speaking anymore. That was something else. Something patient. Something that waited, hidden in the walls and shadows, using the voice as a thread, a tether. Sir? Ma'am? Are you there? My voice cracked. I swallowed hard. The sound of my own voice distorted, echoed in a line like it had been twisted, repeated. Don't leave, don't leave. I stumbled back from the desk, gripping the radio like it was a lifeline. The whisper returned, louder, insistent. Always here, always waiting. I tried to calm myself. Rational thought, logic. Phones can't make themselves work. Voices can't exist in empty houses. Old houses make noises. I repeated it over and over, as if saying it enough could anchor me to reality. But the words, the soft, patient, terrifying words, weren't just in the radio anymore. They were inside me, twisting in my chest, curling in my stomach, sliding along my spine, waiting, watching, patient. I traced the call again. Coordinates, property boundaries, satellite overlays, empty fields, empty house, no evidence of life, nothing, but the voice remained, trembling, real, desperate, wrong. Static surge again. The whisper, they never leave, never. I pressed my hand to my forehead, tried to shake it off, tried to tell myself it was a trick of the line, a malfunction, a hallucination. But I couldn't. I knew better. I had been in that house. I had felt the shifting air, the cold weight in the rooms, the patient watching presence. And now it was speaking to me. Through the line, through my own thoughts. The Rangers arrived. I met them in the driveway, pointing to the house. Someone's inside. The 911 call traced here. Voices, disturbances, doors slamming. Something's wrong. Don't. They nodded, professional, cautious. Radios crackling. Flashlights swinging across the porch. They went in. I stayed outside, watching, my pulse hammering. The morning sun doing nothing to lighten the dread settling over me. Minutes passed. Static returned on my line. Soft at first, then curling into whispers I couldn't understand. Something alive. patient, waiting, twisting in the air. The Rangers came out eventually. Empty house. Nothing. No one. No voice. No disturbance. Just a farmhouse, standing quiet in the sunlight, patient, waiting. I walked to my car, heart still racing. The static on my radio hissed faintly as I turn off, but I could feel the whispering in my mind, curling along the edges of my thoughts. I could still hear it. Always here, always waiting. I drove back to the station in silence, tried to convince myself it was over, that it had ended, but I knew it hadn't. That farmhouse wasn't just abandoned. It wasn't just empty. It had a presence, something patient, something using voices, using whispers, using fear to anchor itself into reality. And I knew if the line ever went live again, if someone ever called, the voice would return, not asking, not begging, waiting, patient, twisting, watching. I didn't sleep that night. The whispers followed me in the hum of the station, the crackle of the electronics, the soft sigh of the air vents. I could hear it in my own voice when I muttered under my breath. Always waiting. The farmhouse hadn't been empty. It never was. It had always been alive. Patient, waiting, twisting, watching. And I knew one day it would speak again. I couldn't shake it. Not for a second. Even hours after the 911 call. Even after the Rangers had left the Miller place empty-handed. Even after the farmhouse sat in the morning light like nothing had ever happened, I felt it. Watching. Patient. Waiting. I got to the station early, long before my shift started. I kept glancing at the map, tracing Old Hollow Road with my finger, trying to convince myself it was over, that the farmhouse was just an old, abandoned structure, and my mind had twisted reality into something unexplainable. But I couldn't. I knew better. The strange thing was when I thought about the footprints, the slamming doors, the whispers, I realized they were gone. Overnight, the evidence had vanished. The prints in the damp grass, the dust disturbed inside the house, even the broken lock on the side door. It was all gone. Clean. Perfect. As if nothing had happened. As if the house had never spoken at all. I stared at the coordinates blinking on my screen. 39.7392 north, 104.9903 west. Impossible. I could feel it in my chest. The same tight, twisting knot I'd felt every time I went near that house. And now, something else had started. Something subtle. Something that got under your skin without warning. I first noticed it when I was reviewing the call logs from last night. The static in the recording seemed wrong, not just interference. It almost felt like the line was breathing, curling around itself. And then I heard it, soft at first, a voice, my own name, whispered, patient, Nina. I froze. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. My heart raced, pounding in my ears. I glanced around the empty station. No one there, just my own reflection in the darkened window, trembling back at me. Nina, the whisper repeated, curling in the silence. I told myself it was imagination, stress, fatigue, too many nights staring at maps, coordinates, old house reports, impossible calls. But the sound, the sense of attention, deliberate and patient, was undeniable. I replayed the call from the farmhouse again. Nothing new, nothing changed. But the static, it seemed to swell differently this time, as if it had a pulse. And with it, the whisper grew, threading to the hum of the electronics. Nina, I pressed my hand to my forehead, tried to shake it off, tried to tell myself it was the sound of the machines or the quiet of the early morning. But the whisper was insistent, patient, calling me, waiting. I left the station briefly, thinking the fresh air would clear my mind. The sun was up, pale but strong enough to chase shadows across the parking lot. And yet, I could still feel it, pulling, tugging at something inside me. That same tight knot in my chest. That cold, patient weight. I couldn't place it, but I knew it was coming from the farmhouse. Always had been, always would be. I drove past the old property later that morning. From the road, it looked harmless, empty, silent. Nothing at all out of place. No footprints. No shadows. No evidence of life. And yet, I could feel it. Patient. Waiting. Watching. I parked for a moment, glancing at the house from the edge of the road. The window stared blankly, dark despite the sun. I swear the porch shifted slightly in my peripheral vision. Not a creak, not a movement I could explain, just a subtle presence. Patient, waiting, and then the whisper came again, clearer than before. "Nina." I jumped. My hands gripped the steering wheel, white-knuckled. My chest ached. I tried to convince myself it was the wind or the hum of my car, or my imagination, but it wasn't. It was deliberate, directed, knowing. Back at the station, I tried to focus on paperwork, on calls, on anything routine, but every sound, every small movement in the office made me jump. The whisper was faint, curling along the edges of the radio, the computer, even the light humming above my desk. "Nina." It was there again. Patient, waiting, not angry, not pleading, just watching, knowing, twisting at the edges of perception. I called my supervisor, told her I needed to take a break, said I wasn't feeling well, that the night had left me tired. She didn't press. She never did. People who work in places like this, dealing with emergencies and impossible calls, understand. But as I walked to my car, the whisper came again. "Nina." I glanced around. Empty parking lot. Morning sun. Trees leaning gently in the breeze. Nothing. Nothing human. But I could feel it. Pulling. Patient. Waiting. At home. I tried to convince myself to sleep. I told myself the farmhouse was just an abandoned house. A collection of old wood and paint, shadows and drafts. Nothing more. I tried to focus on mundane things, groceries, the mail, errands, but every time I closed my eyes, I could feel it. Patient, waiting, that whisper curling in the edges of my thoughts. "Nina." I woke several times that night. Not to sounds, not to dreams, but to a sense of being observed. Patiently, I could feel it in my chest, in the hollow space behind my eyes, in my stomach. Watching, waiting, always there, always patient. The next morning, I tried to review the farmhouse report again. The evidence was gone. Footprints, dust disturbed, doors moved, nothing, perfectly clean. The house stood silent and innocent in the sunlight. I ran my fingers over the report, tracing the words, tracing the coordinates. Nothing could explain it. Nothing made sense. And yet, I could hear it again. Patient, watching. "Nina." It was different this time. Not from a line, not from a radio, not from my imagination. Direct, inside my head, curling around the edges of my thoughts like smoke. Patient, waiting, twisting. I tried to leave it behind, to ignore it, try to convince myself it was a trick of the mind, stress, fatigue. But the name called me, always. Patient, waiting. I went past the farmhouse again, this time in the evening. Shadows stretched long across the field. The air smelled faintly of damp earth, wood, and something I couldn't name. My pulse quickened. The house stood silent, empty, innocent, waiting. "Nina." It whispered again, low, patient, direct, knowing. I stumbled back to my car, heart hammering, hands shaking. Every instinct screamed at me to drive away, never look back, never answer the call. But a part of me, a part one hated, knew it was already too late. The farmhouse had found me, patient, waiting, twisting in the edges of perception. Back at home, I tried to work, tried to eat, tried to sleep. The whisper followed me, faint, insistent. Not angry, not pleading, just patient, always there, watching, waiting, twisting. And I knew I couldn't ignore it. I knew that somehow the house had marked me, that patient, waiting presence had found a way to reach through the distance, through the silence, through the impossible. It wasn't angry. It wasn't desperate. It was patient, waiting, twisting, knowing. I could hear my name again, faint, curling at the edge of my consciousness. "Nina." I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't ignore it. The farmhouse wasn't just empty. It wasn't just abandoned. It was alive, patient, waiting, watching, and now it was calling me. I tried to resist. I tried to push the thought away. Tried to tell myself I wasn't going back. But the name, soft, patient, twisting around the edges of my thoughts, would not leave. I lay in bed that night, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence, and through it, faint, almost imperceptible, I could hear it again. Nina, the house was calling me. Night shifts have a rhythm, a slow pulse, a kind of quiet hum that settles into your bones if you do it long enough. I've been a dispatcher for over a decade, and I know the patterns. The calls come in waves. First, the small stuff, dogs barking, car alarms, neighbors arguing about noise. Then, around 2 or 3 in the morning, the ones that make your stomach tighten, the ones that linger in your mind long after call ends. People think it's just routine. You must hear so many strange things, they say, but it's subtle. Not everything screams danger. Not everything is obvious. Sometimes it's in the pause before someone answers, the almost inaudible breath after a word, the way a person's voice stretches too long on a syllable. That's when you notice something is off. Something is just not right. I remember one night, like any other, checking the monitors, sipping cold coffee, letting the hum of the fluorescent lights settle over me. My headphones crackled, and the first call came in, routine. Woman reporting a car alarm going off down the street. I typed the report, dispatch a unit, nothing unusual. But then I noticed it, a faint pattern almost imperceptible. Every time a call came from that block, the alarm sounded the same. Same timing, same frequency, almost mechanical. My brain tried to dismiss it. Coincidence. Just coincidence. The second call came minutes later. A man complaining about someone knocking on his door. I patched him through, calm, professional. And again, there was that subtle distortion in his voice, a tiny hitch that made me pause. Not a stutter, not nervousness, something else. Almost as if his words were delayed, slightly out of sync with his thoughts. It's hard to explain. You get trained to listen to tone, pitch, background noise, but this was different. It felt deliberate, like the world had hiccuped for a second and something else slipped in just past the edge of hearing. You can't catch it right away. You can't point at it. You just feel it. That tight knot in your chest. That tiny hesitation in your fingers. That chill creeping along your spine. By 4 in the morning, the calls start to get stranger. A child screaming that he can't see his parents. But when the officers arrive, the house is empty. Windows boarded. No sign of life. Reports that don't add up. A car driving in circles in the same neighborhood. But when they trace the plates, it's registered to someone who hasn't lived there in years. I've learned to track patterns. Always patterns. Always something repeating, subtle, like a rhythm hidden beneath the surface. And the more you listen, the more you notice. The small, almost imperceptible echoes that hint at something unnatural. Something patient. Waiting. Sometimes it's the background noise. The faint tapping behind a line. The whisper of wind that doesn't match the weather. The static in a call that curls like smoke, as if the line itself is trying to say something, hiding something just beyond your comprehension. I remember a call from a few months ago. Woman reported hearing footsteps in her attic. I patched her through to police. The call was calm, almost mundane at first, but I noticed the pattern immediately. The footsteps, not random, slow, deliberate, almost measured. And then, every time she inhaled, there was a pause in the sound of the floorboards, almost as if whatever was above her was listening, waiting for her next breath. My stomach twisted. The officers checked the attic. Nothing. No footprints. No dust disturbed. Just silence. And yet, I could still hear it. Clear as day in my mind. Faint, patient, deliberate. A presence waiting, just beyond perception. It's nights like that when I start questioning my own senses. Am I imagining it? Hearing it in the static, the hum, the pauses? Or is there something else in the world? Something patient, deliberate, just beyond human comprehension, using these lines to reach out, to touch the edges of our awareness. I've learned to recognize the signs. The way voices warp slightly when something is near. The soft interference that curls through the line when the caller isn't alone. The way background noises shift, become distorted. Too precise to be coincidence. Too deliberate to be normal. The strangest part is that you start noticing it even when the calls are normal. Dogs barking, alarms, arguments. They start to have patterns. Almost imperceptible, subtle, repeating. A rhythm in the chaos. A hidden pulse that hints at something just beyond the obvious. Something patient, waiting, unseen. I've tried to record them. Try to capture it. Playback sometimes helps, but most times it's gone. Static. Clean lines. Nothing. Almost like whatever it is doesn't want to be caught. Almost like it exists just at the edges of perception. Beyond capture, beyond proof, but present enough to twist your mind. Keep your chest tight. Make your hands shake just a little. I remember the first time I felt it. Clearly. Not subtle this time. A man called in. Screaming, incoherent. Telling me something was following him. I patched him through, trying to calm him. But then I noticed it. The distortion in the background, faint, deliberate, curling like smoke. It whispered something I couldn't understand. My pulse quickened. My fingers shook. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. The line went dead. The man disappeared. Never traced. Never found. The officers found nothing. No car, no footprints. No signs that anyone had been there at all. And yet I knew he had been there. I knew something had followed him. Something patient, waiting, twisting at the edges of reality, just out of reach, just beyond comprehension. That's the thing about night shifts. You get trained to listen, to notice, but no training prepares you for the unnatural patterns, the subtle distortions that hint at something that shouldn't exist, something deliberate, something waiting just beyond perception. I can't explain it. I've tried. I've spent hours replaying calls, analyzing patterns, trying to find a rational explanation. There isn't one. Nothing fits. Nothing adds up. And yet, every once in a while, just faint, just at the edge, you notice the pulse, the rhythm, the subtle signs that the ordinary world isn't all there is, that the night is patient, waiting, twisting, watching. I've had new dispatchers ask me how I know when something is off, how I know when a call isn't normal. I tell them to listen. Listen to the pauses. Listen to the static. Listen to hum behind the words. The almost imperceptible patterns in tone, in timing, in background noise. If you listen closely, you can hear it. Sometimes I hear it even without a call. Even in the quiet hum of the office, in the flicker of the fluorescent lights, in the static of my own radio. A rhythm, a pulse, a subtle insistence that something is there. Patient, waiting, twisting at the edges of perception. I don't sleep well on these nights. I lie awake, listening, waiting for the next call, listening for the pattern, the whisper, the subtle sign, the pulse that tells me the night isn't empty, that the world isn't what it seems, that something else is watching, waiting, patient, deliberate, and always just beyond comprehension. And I know if I stop listening, it will come closer. It always does. It started small. At first, I didn't notice it. A number here, a phrase there, the same digits repeating across calls. I thought it was coincidence. Old systems, outdated lines, maybe someone dialing wrong, a prank. But then it got harder to ignore. I was working the night shift, the same quiet hum, the fluorescent lights flickering faintly above my head, the soft buzz of the radio filling the room. Calls were coming in, routine ones mostly. Car accidents, barking dogs, neighbors arguing over noise complaints. Nothing unusual. Nothing that should have made my stomach tighten the way it did. Then the first one came. A man, his voice calm, almost monotone, repeating the same string of numbers over and over. 7392732. I froze, thinking he was calling the wrong line, or maybe it was a pocket dial. I asked him if he was okay. He didn't answer, just kept repeating the sequence, rhythmically like a chant. I traced the line. Old, patched together, nothing unusual. The number didn't exist in any active registry. No records, nothing. And then it ended abruptly. Just static. Dead silence. I chalked it up to a mistake. But then it happened again. 2 nights later. Different caller. Same pattern. Different voice. Same sequence of numbers. Repeated over and over. Every time, it ended in the same static. The same abrupt disconnection. I started keeping a log. I wrote it down, night after night, charting the numbers, the times, the intervals. Every call, every repetition. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just a weird coincidence. But the pattern became undeniable. The numbers weren't random. Not completely. They repeated at exact intervals. Every 3 hours, almost like clockwork. The same strings, sometimes whispered, sometimes muttered, sometimes spoken calmly. And the phrases. Sometimes a soft, almost imperceptible phrase followed the numbers. They wait, or not yet, or just a faint, echoing whisper I could never quite catch. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Machines, lines, people dialing wrong, glitches. But the intervals were too precise, too deliberate. The repetition too exact. And the tone, something about the voices, the way they carried through the lines, was wrong. Not human wrong. Patient, knowing, watching. I started replaying the calls. Slow, fast, backwards, filters. Anything to catch the anomaly. And there it was, just beneath the surface. Static curling like smoke. A rhythm beneath the words. Almost like something was breathing, pulsing, waiting. I could feel it through the headphones. My fingers trembled. My chest tightened. One night, I finally realized the pattern wasn't just numbers. It was timing, intervals, repetitions across calls that had no connection otherwise. The calls came from different neighborhoods, different lines, different exchanges. No one caller repeated, yet the numbers returned, the phrases returned, and the intervals never wavered, like some hidden clock, hidden in the edges of reality, ticking just out of reach. I told my supervisor. She didn't believe me. Numbers repeat, she said, rubbing her temples. People call at night. They repeat things. It's normal, but I knew better. I've been a dispatcher long enough to know when normal ends and something else begins. It started affecting my sleep. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, counting numbers in my head, tracing the sequences I had logged over the past few weeks. 7392, 2145, 6803. The sequences twisted together in my mind, overlapping, repeating. And then I started hearing them in my dreams. Soft, rhythmic, like someone whispering just outside the edge of perception, patient, waiting, twisting at the corners of thought. I tried to step away from the logs, tried to ignore it, but the pattern followed me. I'd see numbers in the parking lot, on license plates, on receipts, flashing in my mind, not consciously, subconsciously, a pull I couldn't explain. Patient, waiting, watching. Then one night, I heard a voice, different from the others. Clear, patient, deliberate. Not on the line, not in the static, not from a caller, from the edge of my mind. Whispering a number sequence I didn't recognize, but somehow knew I had logged. Repeating, slowly, rhythmic, insistent. I sat up, heart hammering, listening to the quiet of my apartment. The lights hummed softly. My laptop sat on the desk, screensaver running. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, and yet I could feel it. The sequence in my mind, wrapping around me, patient, deliberate, insistent. I replayed the calls again, tracing intervals, connecting dots that shouldn't exist. And I realized something terrifying. The numbers, the phrases, the intervals, they were all building. A pattern, something I couldn't understand, but that I could feel. A message, a clock counting down or counting up. Something deliberate, patient, waiting, watching. I started hearing it in the station too. Not calls, not static, not numbers, just faint rhythmic whispers, curling around the edges of the fluorescent hum. My co-workers noticed nothing. I tried to tell them. They laughed. Long nights make you hear things. But I knew better. The pattern was real, deliberate, beyond human design. I started seeing correlations, calls with numbers repeated before disappearances, before untraceable incidents, faint echoes of panic, broken phrases, voices never found. I traced them all back to intervals, to sequences, to the same repeating digits I had logged. Something was using the lines. Patient, waiting, twisting, watching. It got worse. The sequences began creeping into real life. I'd see digits carved into tree bark while driving between calls. Faint scribbles on sidewalks impossible to place. Numbers repeated on license plates, on street signs, on clocks. The intervals matched. The rhythm followed me through streets, through buildings, through time. I stopped sleeping entirely some nights, listening for the whispers and the static. My mind traced the sequences endlessly. I could hear the voices repeating them softly, deliberately, curling around the edges of my consciousness. Patient, waiting, twisting, watching. One night, I heard the phrase clearly. Not on the line, not whispered in static. In my own head, a voice patient, deliberate, insistent. They come. I froze, gripping the headset, heart hammering, chest tight. That voice had not come from a human caller, not from a line, not from the static. It had come from somewhere else, somewhere patient, waiting, twisting at the edges of thought. I tried to leave the station, tried to drive away, but the numbers followed. 7392, 2145, 6803. They repeated endlessly in my mind, rhythmic, deliberate, insistent, like some hidden clock counting out my thoughts, my heartbeat, my life. I began seeing patterns in everything, in maps, in traffic, in reports, in mundane calls, numbers, intervals, phrases repeating with precision impossible to account for. A rhythm beneath the world, patient, deliberate, waiting. I could feel it coiling around me, pressing against my thoughts. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence, tried to step back, but the whisper followed. Patient, watching, twisting, waiting, not angry, not pleading, just deliberate, insistent. Every call I answered became part of it. Every number repeated, every phrase echoed. The world itself seemed to bend to the rhythm, subtle, imperceptible, deliberate. I could feel the pattern and hum of the fluorescent lights, in the static of my headset, in the pulse of my own heartbeat. Patient, waiting, twisting, watching. And I realized then, the numbers weren't just a message. They weren't just a pattern. They were a warning, a clock, a rhythm that existed just beyond comprehension, beyond perception, shaping reality, waiting for recognition. I keep logs. I trace sequences. I replay calls. But the pattern only grows. Patient, waiting, twisting, watching. I know it's impossible. I know it shouldn't exist. And yet it does. And I know one day I'll understand it. Or it will understand me. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. The first time I noticed it, I thought it was fatigue. Long nights, fluorescent lights, the hum of computers and radios blending into a dull monotone. But there was something else. A quiet voice, soft, patient, insistent, whispering in the background whenever a line went on hold. I remember the first instance clearly. A routine call about a car accident that hadn't happened yet. Or so I thought. The line went on hold while I patched in the nearest unit, and I heard it. A whisper, low, curling at the edges of my consciousness. She'll cross the intersection at 5:09. I froze. My hand hovered over the headset. My pulse hammered in my chest. I didn't recognize the voice. Not human, not any dispatcher or caller I knew. It was deliberate, patient. There was certainty in it, as if it already knew what would happen. I shook my head, told myself I was imagining things. I typed notes mechanically, trying to focus, trying to ignore the hum in the background, the soft, curling whisper that lingered just at the edge of my perception. When the officer arrived at the scene, that exact intersection, at exactly 5:09, the car was there, minor fender bender. Nothing fatal, nothing unusual, just as the voice had said. My stomach twisted. I tried to chalk it up to coincidence, but I couldn't. Not entirely. Then it happened again. A call about a house fire, a false alarm, routine check. I put the line on hold to dispatch units. The voice whispered again. Front door will swing open at 7:10. Don't step in. I blinked, heart hammering. 7:10 came. The door swung open. Flames hadn't reached it yet, but heat rolled out, a warning just in time. I hesitated, heart thumping. The whisper was patient, precise, waiting. It wasn't angry, not malevolent exactly, just deliberate, knowledgeable. After that, I couldn't ignore it. Every line I placed on hold carried the same subtle whispering, almost always predicting incidents before they occurred. Sometimes minor, sometimes terrifyingly specific. The details were often mundane at first. A pedestrian crossing a street, a dog running into the road. But the precision, the timing, it was impossible. I started keeping logs, tracing patterns, writing down every instance. The numbers, the times, the words, every predicted event, every soft, curling voice on hold. It always came just at the edge of awareness, patient, persistent, almost polite, like it was testing me, guiding me gently toward understanding. I began noticing the intervals, just like the repeating numbers from previous nights. The predictions came with exact spacing. Some calls clustered close together, others stretched across hours. But each was deliberate, patient, an unseen hand nudging reality just so, curling around the edges of perception. I tried to share my observations with the other dispatchers. Some laughed. Long nights, they said, hearing things that aren't there. But a few of them noticed it too. Quiet murmurs, soft warnings in the background when lines went on hold. Some admitted feeling a cold sense of dread, a prickling awareness that something else was present, observing. We started testing it. One dispatcher would place a call on hold intentionally. Another would wait, and then it would whisper, always a warning, always precise. Sometimes the predictions were vague, like it would call for help. Other times impossibly exact. Addresses, times, descriptions of vehicles, even phrases a caller would use. It didn't happen on every line, and it wasn't consistent enough to explain away as technical error. But the moments it did occur, the outcomes matched. Precise, uncanny, impossible to ignore. I remember a call about a missing child. The line went on hold while we patched in additional units. The whisper curled through the static, patient, precise. Behind the shed, she waits at 627. We arrived at 627, just as it said. The child was there, hidden, unharmed. No one else had reported it. Nothing in the system indicated anything unusual. But the voice had known. The timing, the location, it was perfect. After that, I stopped questioning it entirely. The voice on hold was real. Not imagined. Not coincidence. Something deliberate. Something patient. Waiting. Twisting at the edges of perception. It began affecting my sleep. I would lie awake at night, hearing it whisper in my mind even without a call, predicting things that hadn't yet occurred. Subtle, insistent, curling around my thoughts. Patient, watching, waiting. I would replay the events in my head, trying to understand, trying to map patterns, sequences, intervals. But the more I analyzed, the more elusive it became. Sometimes the predictions were subtle, almost trivial. A neighbor leaving a window open, a mailbox falling, a stray cat wandering across a driveway. But the accuracy was always precise. The voice had never been wrong. Not once. Other times, the predictions were more alarming. Car crashes, fires, sudden injuries, incidents that hadn't yet happened until they did. Always exactly as whispered. Always patient, waiting, curling just at the edge of comprehension. The more I listened, the more I felt it, not just as a voice, not just as a whisper on the line, but as a presence, patient, deliberate, weaving to the hum of the station, around the flicker of fluorescent lights, curling around monitors, through static, through my own heartbeat, waiting, watching, twisting. I began hearing it even without calls, in the hum of electronics, in the flicker of lights, in the quiet moments between calls. Soft, low, deliberate, whispering, predicting, patient, waiting, twisting at the edges of thought. It wasn't always clear. Sometimes a word, sometimes a phrase, sometimes just numbers, sometimes a warning, sometimes a simple observation, but always deliberate, always precise, always there at the edge of perception, curling, patient, watching. And then one night, it spoke directly to me, not through a line, not through static. In my own mind, patient, deliberate, curling around the edges of my consciousness. You will hear them next. Prepare. I froze, heart racing. Every instinct screamed at me. And then the next call came through. A simple domestic dispute. Nothing unusual. But the moment the line went on hold, the whisper returned. Kitchen. Door. Will open at 7:13. Be ready. I stared at the monitor, heart hammering, fingers trembling. 7:13. The door opened. The dispute erupted exactly as predicted. The officers arrived. Everything unfolded precisely as whispered. I realized then that it wasn't just predicting incidents. It was guiding them. Patient, watching, waiting, twisting reality at the edges, bending the world subtly, deliberately, and always whispering, always patient. We began noticing patterns and predictions, repetition, numbers, phrases, intervals, subtle signals hidden in the timing, the order, the cadence of the whispering. The voice wasn't random. It was deliberate. It was teaching, nudging, guiding, patient, waiting, watching, twisting. The worst part was knowing it could reach me anywhere, not just on calls, not just in the station, but inside my mind, patient, deliberate, curling around my thoughts, waiting for recognition. The whisper would slip in at the edge of sleep, at the edge of attention, almost polite, almost soft, always patient, always precise, always impossible. I can't ignore it. I try, but even now, I hear it curling at the edges of thought, not angry, not pleading, just deliberate, patient, waiting, twisting, watching, and I know it's only a matter of time before it speaks again, directly, not through a line, not on hold, not in static, but inside me, patient, waiting, twisting. Every time I pick up the headset now, I know it's listening. Not me, the world, curling through the edges of perception, waiting, patient, deliberate, whispering, predicting, teaching, waiting. And I can't stop listening, because it's always right, because it will never be wrong, because it is patient, waiting, twisting, watching, and soon I know it will call my name. I don't remember when it started. The first time I noticed it, I thought it was fatigue. Long nights, endless calls, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. But the feeling wasn't just exhaustion. It was wrong. Time slipping, hours disappearing without explanation, gaps in memory that I couldn't account for. I'd be reviewing logs from the night shift, checking call records, and suddenly hours had passed. Not consciously, not like forgetting conversation, but real hours. Entire blocks of time erased. Notes typed automatically in the logs. Calls recorded that I didn't remember answering. And sometimes the calls weren't from anyone else at all. The first one hit me like a punch. My headset crackled and a familiar voice spoke through the line. My voice. Say my name. Calm, measured, professional. Reporting an incident I had no memory of taking. I froze. Fingers hovering over the keyboard. Heart hammering. I listened to the recording. My voice. Clear as day. And yet, I had no recollection to call. None. I called the number back. Disconnected. Traced it. Nothing. No record. No connection. Just me. My own voice. Speaking to someone. Reporting something that may or may not have happened. It happened again. Later that night. Another call. Another voice. Mine. Calm. Professional. Reporting a false alarm. A disturbance. Something minor. But the log showed it as a real call. An actual report. And yet, I had no memory of taking it. The gaps grew. Minutes. Hours. I started keeping a personal log. try to anchor myself to reality. I noted the times, the incidents, the gaps, each night more missing, more calls I had no memory of taking, and always my own voice, patient, measured, watching, reporting. At first, I thought it was stress, long shifts, lack of sleep, audio hallucinations, but the recordings didn't lie. They were there, clear, my voice, answering calls I couldn't remember, reporting incidents I couldn't recall, and sometimes the reports were wrong. Minor details shifted, locations mismatched, people misidentified, as if someone or something was using me as a conduit, manipulating events through the lines. I started noticing patterns. The calls that appeared in my voice always happened during the hours I couldn't remember, the gaps in time, the lost hours, almost like those missing moments were occupied by something else, something patient, waiting, watching, twisting reality at the edges, filling the blanks with me. One night, the gaps stretched for 4 hours. When I came to, the station was quiet. The other dispatchers were gone. The log showed calls taken, incidents recorded. My voice on the line, calm, measured, professional, reporting incidents that may have happened or may not have. I couldn't tell. I had no memory, nothing to anchor reality, just the recordings, my own voice, patient, waiting, twisting. I started playing back the calls obsessively, listening for patterns, for clues, for any sign of another presence. And I noticed subtle differences. At first, nearly imperceptible. A hesitation, a pause that was mine, a flicker in tone, slight distortions in the background, almost like the line itself was alive, twisting, curling around my words, adding something, subtle, patient, deliberate, watching. Then the whispers began, low, faint, curling at the edges of the call, beneath my own voice, not my words, not anyone else's, patient, deliberate, insistent, waiting, twisting at the edges of perception. I tried to leave the station, tried to step away, sleep, eat, forget, but even then, the gaps appeared, hours I couldn't account for, my own voice appearing on the line, recording calls I didn't remember taking, sometimes mundane, sometimes alarming, always precise, always patient, always watching. I confronted one of the other dispatchers, asked if they had noticed anything strange. Some shrugged. Long nights, fatigue, stress. But one of them looked at me with the same wide-eyed tension I felt. I've heard it too, they said. Voices on hold, on the line, sometimes our own, reporting things that didn't happen yet, or did, in a way we can't explain. It wasn't comfort. It was confirmation. Patient, waiting, watching, twisting. The lost time began to stretch further. A whole night disappeared once. No recollection. Just logs, recordings, my own voice reporting incidents I couldn't recall. My hands would shake as I replayed the files. Every word, every pause, every faint whisper beneath my voice. Patient, waiting, twisting, watching. I started noticing other signs. Objects moved on my desk. Notes I hadn't written. Screens open to calls I hadn't patched. Evidence of activity, but not mine. Someone or something using me. My voice, my presence, filling gaps in time, in reality, curling around the edges, twisting, patient, waiting. One night, I fell asleep at the station, briefly, or at least I thought so. When I awoke, logs showed 10 calls taken, 10 incidents recorded, my voice on every line. Calm, measured, professional, reporting events I had no memory of witnessing. Names, locations, times. All accurate, too accurate. I played them back. My voice, but beneath it, subtle. A faint shift in cadence. Slight distortions in the background. Almost like a presence threading through the recordings, patient, deliberate, insistent, waiting, twisting at the edges of reality. I began to fear the gaps themselves, the lost hours, the stretches of time I could not recall. Every dispatcher fears fatigue, mistakes, burnout, But this was different. Something deliberate. Something waiting. Curling around the edges of perception. Using the hours I couldn't remember to manifest. To manipulate. To watch. It became impossible to sleep. Impossible to step away. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the presence. Patient. Waiting. Twisting. My own voice whispering back at me from the darkness. From the line. From the gaps in time. Reporting things I had no memory of. Reporting me. I started noticing small distortions in reality. The station itself seemed different after the lost hours. Items shifted. Logs recorded in odd sequences. Calls appearing in the system I couldn't trace. It was like the station itself had been occupied during those gaps. Manipulated. Twisted. Patient. Waiting. Watching. I don't know how long it's been happening. Hours? Days? Weeks? Sometimes I feel like I blink and the lost time swallows me whole. And then I wake. Logs full. Calls recorded. My own voice on the line. Calm, patient, deliberate. Watching. Twisting. Waiting. One night, I recorded a call. My own voice reporting an incident. I played it back. Clear. Me. Calm. Professional. And then I heard it. Beneath my voice. A whisper curling through the static. Patient. Deliberate. Familiar. Not mine. A promise. A warning. A presence. You were gone. I froze. Heart hammering. The whisper repeated. Curling at the edges of thought. Patient. Waiting. Twisting. Watching. I don't know where the hours go. Don't know what happens during the lost time. But I know that I am never alone. Never in control. Not fully. There is a presence. Patient. Waiting. Twisting. Watching. Using me. My voice. My actions. My perception. I've started marking the hours. Trying to anchor myself. Log my own consciousness. Keep track of reality. But even then, gaps appear. Hours I cannot account for. Calls I cannot remember taking. My own voice reporting things I cannot recall. And beneath it all, the whisper. Patient. Waiting. Twisting. Watching. I don't know if I will ever recover those hours. Or if I want to. The lost time, it calls me. Patient. Waiting. Curling around the edges of perception. Whispering through the lines. Threading through my own voice. Twisting reality just enough to keep me uncertain. Always watching. Always deliberate. Always patient. And every time I hear it, my own voice speaking events I cannot remember, I know it is not entirely me. It has been here. Patient. Waiting. Watching. Twisting. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to step out of its reach. Because the lost time belongs to it. Patient. Waiting. Twisting. Watching. It started with the monitors. Small things at first. A flicker here. A shadow there. I chalked it up to old equipment. To the hum of fluorescent lights. To fatigue. But you notice these things when you've worked the night shift long enough. You notice patterns. And the patterns didn't make sense. I remember the first clear instance. I was checking security feeds, routine scan, when I saw a movement. At first, it was peripheral, a flicker at the edge of the frame, a shadow passing by a doorway, just out of reach, just beyond clarity. I leaned closer. Nothing, just a hallway. Empty, hum of electronics. Fluorescent lights flickering. My pulse quickened. I told myself it was a glitch. Cameras lagged. Shadows played tricks. But then it moved again. Not random. Deliberate. Smooth. Fluid. Watching. Equipment started acting up. Radios crackled for no reason. Headsets produced faint whispers beneath the static. Computers froze. Screens flickering with images that weren't there before. At first subtle. Numbers, shapes, almost imperceptible distortions. And then faces. Just for a frame. A flash of movement that looked human but wrong. Too tall, too still, too fast. Shadows curling around corners, gliding to the frame, disappearing when I blinked. I tried to rationalize. Old building, faulty wiring, shadows cast by passing cars. Anything, but it became harder. The monitors didn't just flicker randomly. They followed me. The longer I watched, the clearer the shapes became. Watching. patient, waiting, twisting at the edges of perception. One night, a dispatcher in training noticed it too. "Did you see that?" they whispered. I looked at them, heart hammering, trying to appear calm. "See what?" "The figure in the back hallway. It moved. Just a shadow, but it looked real." I froze, tried to reassure them, tell them it was just a trick of the camera, but my own voice sounded hollow, because I'd seen it too, and not just once, multiple times. Always fleeting, always deliberate, always watching. The more we monitored, the more frequent the appearances. Shadowy figures, always just beyond recognition, sometimes reflected in screens, sometimes only glimpsed at the edge of vision, always patient, waiting, twisting, watching. Equipment failures escalated. Radios would broadcast faint static when no calls were active. Headsets would carry whispers, not voices from the calls, but something else, something deliberate, patient, insistent, twisting around the edges of thought. One night, a figure appeared on the monitors and stayed. Not fleeting, not a flicker, standing at the end of the hallway, silent, perfectly still, tall, indistinct, but unmistakably human-shaped. I watched it for what felt like hours, though the clock said 10 minutes. And then, when I blinked, it was gone. Just the hallway. Empty, but I knew it had been there. Patient, watching, waiting. The shadow became more daring. It moved through the station. Offices I was in, hallways I had just checked, caught on monitors, glimpsing reflections on glass. Sometimes behind me when I glance away, sometimes appearing on screens I hadn't turned on. Always fleeting, always deliberate. Other dispatchers began noticing oddities too. Objects moving, phones off the hook, papers shifting, equipment malfunctioning in ways that couldn't be explained. And the shadows, they followed patterns. Always patient, always deliberate, always watching, twisting reality just enough to make us doubt our senses. I remember the first time it almost spoke. Not words exactly, but sound. Low, curling at the edges of thought. Beneath the hum of equipment, beneath the static. Something whispering, patient, deliberate, almost polite but insistent. Waiting, twisting at the edges of perception. I tried to leave it alone, tried to ignore it, but it became impossible. Always there, patient, deliberate, following me through the station, watching, waiting, twisting. Even when I shut doors, the monitors showed it slipping past them. Even when I turned away, it lingered in the edges of vision, always patient, always deliberate. Sometimes it mimicked movements, subtle, almost imperceptible, shifts in monitors matching my own actions, shadows moving in sync with my steps, headset static echoing my own voice, faintly, deliberately, twisting perception, patient, waiting, watching. The longer it lingered, the more it affected us. Fatigue wasn't just physical anymore. It was mental, emotional. The station became oppressive. Every shadow, every flicker of light, every whisper of static made the air heavy. Eyes strained, hearts racing. No one wanted to be alone in the room with the monitors. We'd sit in pairs, exchanging nervous glances, sharing stories of fleeting shadows, strange sounds, objects moving, always patient, always deliberate, always watching. And then it escalated further. The shadows began appearing on cameras that had never worked properly. Monitors that had been offline for weeks flickered to life with a single image. A tall, indistinct figure standing perfectly still, not moving, watching, waiting, patient, twisting. We tried tracing it. Cameras, wiring, electrical faults. Nothing, no explanation, nothing physical. It was like the station itself had changed, occupied, alive in ways we couldn't comprehend. Patient, waiting, twisting, watching. One night, alone, I walked through the station, just routine checks, and I felt it, patient, behind me, watching, twisting around the edges of perception. I swore I saw a movement in the corner of my eye, shadows sliding across the floor, silent, smooth, deliberate, waiting. I turned, nothing, the hallway empty. But the monitors told a different story. Flickers, shapes indistinct, always human-like, always patient, watching, twisting reality just enough to make me doubt my own senses. The whispers returned. Low, curling at the edges of thought. Patient, deliberate, insistent. Not words I could understand, but presence, consciousness, watching, waiting, twisting at the edges of perception. We stopped staying late. The night shift became unbearable. Shadows appeared more often. Equipment failed in uncanny ways. Whispers curling through headsets, even when calls weren't active. Every monitor, every screen, every reflection could hold a shape, a movement, a presence just beyond recognition. Patient, watching, waiting, twisting. One dispatcher refused to come back after witnessing it clearly. Security footage showed them leaving, but monitors also caught a shadow moving toward them. Elongating, curling, reaching. Nothing touched them. Nothing physically harmed them. But the look on their face when recounting it, sheer, undeniable terror. Patient, waiting, watching, twisting. I started noticing patterns in the shadows. Deliberate pauses, movements echoing ours, timing of appearances linked to specific calls. Intervals almost clock-like in precision. Patient, waiting, twisting at the edges of perception. Always deliberate. Always there. Always watching. I stopped sleeping. Not just at the station. At home, too. The hum of fluorescent lights in my apartment. The static in old radios. The corner of my vision. Everything seemed alive. Shadows curling, patient, deliberate, insistent. Watching. Waiting. Twisting reality just enough to make me doubt my mind. I began to document everything. Every flicker, every whisper, every shadow, every equipment malfunction. Patterns emerged. Numbers, movements, timings, repetition, echoes of previous incidents. Presence patient, deliberate, twisting, waiting, watching. It wasn't malicious, exactly, not in a way I could define. Just deliberate, observant, testing boundaries. Patient, waiting, twisting at the edges of reality. I can't explain why it chose the station. Maybe it's the hours, the energy, the lines connecting us to the outside world. Maybe it's drawn to our attention, our awareness. Whatever it is patient, waiting, watching, twisting reality at the edges of perception. And I know it will not stop. Not until I leave. Not until the station is abandoned. Shadows, whispers, equipment failures, fleeting shapes, subtle manipulations. They are deliberate, patient, waiting, watching, twisting. I can't turn away. I can't ignore it, because the station itself is alive, or haunted, or something else. Something patient, waiting, twisting, watching. And every time I glance at a monitor, I know it's there, watching me, patient, waiting, twisting at the edges of perception. Deliberate, always deliberate. Even now, as I write this, I hear it. Patient, waiting, watching, twisting. I always thought a graveyard shift was supposed to be quiet. Maybe a little lonely, sure, but nothing sinister. I used to joke with the deputies that nothing comes alive when everyone else is asleep. I was wrong. I know that now. I should have known it. After 32 years wearing this badge, after every call that crawled under my skin and left me staring at shadows long after the sirens died down, it started just like any other night. I remember walking into the station at 8, coffee in hand, badge clipped to my belt, shoulders heavy with the years I didn't even notice until now. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, flickering like they wanted to quit too. My partner for the night, a rookie named Harris, was already at his desk. Fresh face, bright eyes, and the kind of nervous energy that comes from thinking the world hasn't eaten you alive yet. "You ready for your last one, Sheriff?" he said, trying for casual, but his tone had that edge of uncertainty that you get when you know something's off but can't name it. I smiled, told him, always ready. But the truth? I wasn't. I didn't know I wasn't ready. The first call was nothing. Just a noise complaint down an old hollow. A dog barking all night. A neighbor claiming it sounded like a human at times. When we drove out, the streets were quiet. The kind of quiet that presses in on you, heavy and damp. The dog? Dead. I don't mean it had been put down. I mean it was lying there in the yard, eyes wide open, staring. Neck at a wrong angle, like it had been watching something it shouldn't have. Harris gagged, covering his mouth, and I had to stop myself from looking away. Some part of me had already recognized a feeling creeping in. This night wasn't going to be normal. We left the property, and I noticed a fog settling low across the road. It wasn't the usual mist you get in October. This was thick, curling around the headlights, tasting cold and heavy. Harris squinted, saying, "Is it just me, or does it smell off?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I smelled it too, like wet earth after rain, but sharper, undercut with something rotten, something alive and dead at the same time. By midnight, calls started coming faster. Most were false alarms, the usual drunks and domestic disputes that don't go anywhere. But some were different. I can still hear the voices in my mind, the ones I answered on the radio. "Sheriff? Something's in my house. I can hear it moving." "Ma'am," stay calm. "Where are you?" "There's footsteps. Not mine. Not my husband's. It's, oh God, it's whispering." I remember gripping the wheel, so hard my knuckles ached. Harris was quiet beside me, pale and shaking, eyes darting from the road to me like he thought I had the answers. I didn't. Nothing in my 32 years could have prepared me for the sound that greeted us when we arrived. The house was empty. Every door locked, every light off. But the whispering, it came from inside. Soft, low, curling to the walls, repeating words I couldn't make out. We stayed for hours, scouring every room, every closet, and found nothing. And yet, I knew it hadn't been in my head. That voice, or whatever it was, had been real. After that call, my gut started screaming. I didn't know why. I just knew. There's a line you cross in this job where fear isn't about danger. It's about knowing there's something you can't name, something that's patient, waiting, and it's watching. I'd crossed that line. By 2 a.m., the station itself began to feel wrong. Phones would ring with static. Radio chatter that didn't belong to anyone in our county. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Shadows stretching along the walls like they'd wait. I sat at my desk, paperwork in front of me, trying to pretend this was all in my head. Harris had already started pacing, muttering about ghosts, about the old stories he'd heard about the town. I ignored him, not because I didn't believe him, but because I couldn't admit to myself that maybe he was right. And then came the call that changed everything. It was from the cemetery, not the usual night watchman complaint or a trespasser. It was nothing, just a breathy whisper over the line, saying, "You shouldn't be here." I remember laughing. Nerve laugh. The kind that sounds hollow even to yourself. Which cemetery? The Eastfield one. No answer. Just a static, the long drawn-out hiss of someone or something breathing into the receiver. I grabbed my coat, pistol tucked inside the holster, and told Harris, "Let's go. Just a prank, that's all." But it wasn't a prank. Eastfield Cemetery looked like every cemetery does at night. Rows of stones and statues caught in moonlight. Shadows thick and long. I walked between the graves, heart hammering. The air colder than the autumn night should have allowed. Harris followed, whispering questions I didn't answer. That's when I saw it. Not a figure. Not a person. Just the fog itself moving differently. Flowing around the gravestones like it had purpose. Rising, retreating. Curling up to form shapes that almost weren't shapes. Faces, maybe. Faces that disappeared when you looked directly at them, like they knew you were watching and didn't want to be seen. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling despite my efforts to stay calm. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Not my own, not Harris's. Coming from behind me. Slow and careful, like the earth itself was breathing under someone else's weight. I spun around. Nothing. "You hearing that?" I whispered. Harris nodded, eyes wide. "It's just theirs." His voice broke off. A cold wind blew. Not a normal wind. Not the kind you feel brushing past your face. This was inside my chest, rattling my bones. I swear I felt something brush past me. Something cold and wet, like fog and blood mixed. We didn't speak for a long while. Just walked, silent, listening to the sounds that weren't supposed to exist. And then, right as I reached the oldest part of the cemetery, I saw it. A grave, freshly dug. No markers. No sign it had been touched by anyone I knew. But the soil, it was wet, glistening in the moonlight, and the air around it smelled like the dog from earlier. Rotten, metallic, alive. I knelt, unable to stop myself. Something about the urge to see, to know, overrode every instinct I had left. That's when I heard it again, faint at first, then louder, a whisper curling around my ear. Your last shift. I froze, my hand stilled over the earth. I turned, but the fog had thickened, hiding Harris, hiding everything. The sound of breathing surrounded me, not human, not entirely. I realized that I wasn't alone, not for a second that night. And maybe I hadn't been for years. Harris's scream tore through the night. I spun and he was gone. Just gone. No struggle, no sign. Just vanished into fog like he'd never existed. My heart pounded, my mind racing, screaming for a reason. But the only sound left was a whisper, circling me, calling me to the grave. I don't remember running. I don't remember how I got back to the car. Only that when I did, the engine wouldn't start, the lights flickered, and that same voice whispered from the radio, soft and deliberate. You can't leave. I spent the rest of my shift trapped in that car, dawn bleeding over the horizon, fog thinning, but the weight never lifting. By the time I drove back to the station, Harris was gone. No trace, no explanation, and the sheriff's office was quiet again, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. I retired now. Officially. Badge turned in, gun in the locker, keys on the hook. But the memories don't retire. The whispers follow me. Nights are longer than they should be. Shadows too deep. Shapes that move just beyond the corner of my eyes. And every time I hear a faint static on the radio, I remember my last shift. I remember the cold brush of something not human against my skin. The whisper telling me I couldn't leave. They say the graveyard shift is for the young, the brave, the foolish. I thought I was all three. I know now I was only one thing. Unlucky enough to see what waits when the world sleeps. And I keep wondering, was it really my last shift, or is it still going, waiting for me to answer call again? Because I know this. I will. I should have thrown the radio out the window the first time it happened. But I didn't. You don't think clearly when the voice that comes through isn't supposed to be there. When it's familiar. When it's someone you buried years ago. The night started like any other after my retirement. Quiet streets. The hum of my old patrol car. And me trying to convince myself that what I'd seen at Eastfield Cemetery was a one-off. A bad dream. An overactive imagination. That's what I told myself. It began around 11. I was sitting in my old living room, a half-empty cup of coffee, growing cold on the side table, staring at the radio I'd kept from my last shift. Old habit, old comfort. It still worked, though the static was worse than it used to be. I turned it on, more out of routine than necessity, and immediately regretted it. The first sound was just static, like always. I was about to turn it off when I heard a whisper. Faint at first, a single word. Sheriff. My stomach dropped. The voice, it was Deputy Larson. I'd known him for 20 years before the accident. He had died on duty, a heart attack during a routine traffic stop. I remember holding the radio at that moment, thinking my mind had betrayed me. I thought it was a recording, some leftover memory, but the word repeated, clearer this time. Sheriff, danger. I froze. The hair on the back of my neck prickled. My hand shook as I reached for the volume. And then it came again, his voice unmistakable, calling out warnings I didn't understand. It wasn't just him. Soon, there were more. Names I recognized immediately. Officers who had served with me, gone before their time. Each one calling, whispering. Their words laced with urgency, fear, a sense of something unseen creeping closer. You shouldn't be alone. Don't go outside. It's coming. I wanted to scream, to tell myself it was impossible, but it was real and present, curling around the edges of my mind like smoke. I grabbed a notebook I always kept on the nightstand, the one where I wrote details from my shifts, Things I didn't want to forget. My hands scribbled frantically as the voices continued, sometimes overlapping, a chaotic chorus of warnings. Each message seemed fragmented, broken, as if the dead themselves struggled to communicate across a boundary I wasn't meant to understand. At first, I thought it was a prank. Maybe someone knew I'd kept the old equipment, knew my history, and wanted to scare me. But the voices weren't imitating anyone. They carried the weight of the years, of real experiences, of lives lost too soon. There was a familiarity in the fear, the timbre of voices etched into memory. And then I realized some of them were calling my name in places they had never been alive. Locations I had never sent them to. Directions I didn't know how to follow. I tried to ignore it, reasoning that if I turned it off, the voices would vanish. But they didn't. Not really. They became part of the static, a low hum that lingered even when the radio was unplugged. I started hearing footsteps at night, faint, deliberate. Shadows move where shadows shouldn't. Every reflection in a window, in a mirror, hinted at figures just out of sight. I began documenting the messages, hoping to find a pattern. Names, times, locations, coordinates that didn't make sense. Places I had never patrolled, towns that didn't exist on any map I owned. The more I wrote, the heavier the air felt, as though the room itself leaned closer to read over my shoulder. One night, around 3 a.m., the warnings became more direct. "Sheriff, do not answer the door." I froze mid-sentence as the kitchen light flickered. I hadn't heard anyone approach. I hadn't heard the knock. But instinct screamed that someone or something was there. I waited. The light stabilized and nothing appeared. Nothing at all. Then the radio crackled again. It's waiting outside. That time, the voice was different. Deeper, distorted, almost blending several voices into one. I could hear fear, but beneath it, something else, malice, anticipation. The sound made my stomach churn. I realized that the warnings weren't meant for me to avoid danger. They were meant to prepare me for what would inevitably come. I started sleeping with the radio on, tuned to static, letting the voices guide me. They told me when to close windows, when to lock doors, when to leave certain rooms alone. I began to follow the instructions, hesitant at first, but the second I ignored them, the house shifted. Objects moved, shadows deepened, the temperature dropped. The sense of being watched grew unbearable. It wasn't just the house. The world outside the walls of my home seemed different. Streets that were familiar took on a menacing edge. A fog settled in patches, moving unnaturally, curling around corners, around streetlights. I would see shapes in the mist, indistinct but deliberate. And the radio, always a radio, whispering guidance, never explanations. Some nights, I swear I saw a figure standing at the edge of the fog. Not fully there, more like echoes of memory, blurred and flickering. They didn't move like humans. Their heads turned too fast, limbs bent in ways that made my stomach knot. I'd try to blink them away, to convince myself it was imagination. But every time, the radio would crackle. "Do not look away. They see you." Sleep became impossible. I drifted in a half-conscious state, listening, writing, obeying. My neighbors stopped visiting. My phone calls went unanswered. I stopped going out. The voices, the warnings, they became my world. And outside that world, there was nothing but whatever was waiting. Once, I thought I saw Larson in the driveway, his uniform torn and dirted, face pale and wet. I screamed and ran inside, locking every door. The radio whispered, "It's not him. It's only the warning." I stayed in that state for hours, shaking, tears rolling down my face, unsure whether relief or terror was stronger. Eventually, I realized that the dead were guiding me for a reason. Something I couldn't see, something that moved in shadows and fog, something patient and precise. I don't know why they chose me, why their voices pierced the divide, but I knew that night after night, the messages were growing clearer, more urgent, each phrase repeated, as if drilling into my mind, preparing me for a final shift that didn't exist in calendars or clocks. The strangest part? The radio only spoke in fragments. Names, locations, warnings. Nothing complete. And I realized the dead didn't need full sentences. They didn't need to explain. They only needed to convey urgency, to make me feel that there was something beyond the veil that I couldn't ignore. I started hearing things when the radio wasn't on. Whispers in the walls, shadows moving against a grain of light, my own footsteps echoing with voices that weren't mine. It was like the warnings had unlocked something, like the barrier between living and dead had thinned just enough for me to glimpse it. One night, I followed a set of instructions that came to the radio. Go to the old bridge on the outskirts of town. I don't know why I obeyed. Maybe I was desperate for answers. Maybe I was too afraid to resist. The fog swallowed the road, thick and choking. I could barely see the outline of the bridge. And when I reached the center, the radio crackled one final time. Do not cross the water. Wait. I stood there for hours, frozen. The water below rippled unnaturally, black and thick. I swear I saw faces moving just beneath the surface. Then the radio went silent. Complete silence, except for my own ragged breathing. I didn't know if I'd been waiting for hours or minutes. Time didn't exist anymore. Only the instructions, the warnings, and the knowledge that something was out there, just beyond my perception. I went home exhausted, empty, but still alive. The voices didn't stop, not completely. They became quieter, but persistent, like a heartbeat on the floorboards. I realized that they had prepared me, taught me, guided me through something I still didn't fully understand. And I knew, deep down, that their warnings were not for my protection alone. They were for something else, something unseen. Now, even in daylight, the radio hums, static-filled half-dead voices, fragmented messages that I can't fully comprehend. I keep it nearby, even though I know what it will bring, even though I know the dead will never truly leave me alone, because something is out there, something waiting, something patient, watching, moving to the fog and the shadows, beyond the reach of anyone still alive. And the warnings continue, reminding me, shaping me. The radio from beyond has become my reality, and every word it speaks carries the weight of a world I no longer belong to. I don't sleep anymore. I don't go out. I exist between the warnings, between the voices, between life and whatever is waiting. And every time the static crackles, I know one thing for certain. It's not over. It will never be over. It started with the phone ringing, one of those late-night calls you don't answer, until something in your gut insists you do. The kind of instinct I've honed over decades as a sheriff. The split-second judgment that keeps you alive. I should have hung up. I should have. But I didn't. The voice on the other end was frantic, breathless, a whisper that wavered between panic and pleading. Sheriff, please, you have to listen. It's happening again, just like before. I paused, gripping the receiver, so hard I thought I might crush it. The tone, it wasn't local, not fully. It trembled with familiarity, as if someone I had known for years had suddenly become unrecognizable. Slow down. Who is this? I asked, trying to steady my own voice. Even now, I can hear the tremor that betrayed my fear. They said it's going to happen. You won't stop it. You never stopped it. My stomach turned. I've heard panic before. I've responded to emergencies, riots, shootings, fires that devoured homes and lives. But this was different. This wasn't human panic. It was knowledge. Pure, certain, unrelenting knowledge of events that hadn't yet occurred. What's happening? I said, my mind racing. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, electric and cold. The voice stammered, a jittering rhythm of fear and clarity. The house at the end of Willow Lane. Don't go in. Don't let them. I felt my pulse spike. Willow Lane. That wasn't random. I patrolled that street 100 times. Never liked the way the shadows lingered near the corners. Never liked the old houses with their peeling paint and darkened windows. Something about that place always set my teeth on edge. Who was there? Who's at the house? I pressed, but the line crackled. The voice came back, overlapping itself now. Fragments repeating like a broken record. They're inside. He's there. The boy. No, the girl is happening again. I wanted to ask how anyone could know, how they could speak of a he and she when nothing had happened yet. But I couldn't. The urgency, the raw terror, held me captive. Every instinct screamed to act, But another part of me, rational, trained, warned me to wait, to understand. The voice began to describe things I shouldn't have known. The layout of the house, the creak of the front steps, the shadow by the broken window, the smell of something rotting just beyond the kitchen door. I froze as the words formed pictures in my mind. Pictures that matched the house exactly. Every detail I'd learned from routine checks, yes, but some were impossible. Some were things no one could know without being inside. They don't look. Don't let them see you. The woman, she's crying. The man, he's gone. They think it's just the wind, but it's inside. It's waiting. I gripped the phone tighter. My hand shook. My memories of previous calls, of previous shifts, collided with what I was hearing now. The line between past and present blurred. A cold, sinking feeling gripped me. The sensation that time itself was bending, folding over, repeating events before they even began. I remember standing at the edge of my driveway, staring into the night, listening. The voice repeated the details with relentless precision, as if rehearsing a tragedy I was powerless to prevent. It was telling me about something that had already happened and hadn't happened yet. Sheriff, they're in the attic. The boy, he's screaming. You have to stop them. Don't wait. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But I couldn't, not because of duty, but because the call had a gravity that chained me in place. Every word felt like a thread, tying me to something inevitable. I took the keys from the counter, heart hammering, as the voice continued. Names, faces, fragments of life I hadn't encountered yet, or maybe had, in some distorted reflection of memory. I drove without thinking, following instructions that felt both arbitrary and exact. The town blurred past me, lights casting long shadows, the fog creeping along the edges of the road like fingers reaching out to pull me into something older than reason. Arriving at Willow Lane, I parked and approached the house cautiously. The voice guided me in fragments. Through the side gate. Don't step on the cracks in the path. They know when you're careful. They know everything. The garden was overgrown, shadows pooling under the trees. I could feel the weight of the air, thick with a smell I could almost place, damp with decay, something acrid and alive. Every instinct screamed that I shouldn't be there, that the voice might be luring me into a trap I couldn't escape. But the urgency, the repetition, the panic, it was hypnotic. I had to know. I edged around the side of the house, following the instructions. Each step was calculated, measured, like a dance with an invisible partner I couldn't see. And then I heard it, the crying, soft at first, almost childlike, a sound that burrowed into the chest, twisted itself around your ribs until it made it impossible to breathe. The voice whispered, urging me, describing what was happening. Don't look. She's hiding behind the couch. The man, he's don't let him see you. I froze. The words weren't just guidance. They were prophecy. I could see the room through a cracked window, dimly lit by moonlight. Shadows moved unnaturally, curling, twisting in ways that shouldn't be possible. A figure darted behind the furniture. The cries echoed in the house and in my chest simultaneously. I wanted to call out, to stop it, but the voice warned me again. Not yet. Watch. Learn. Don't interfere. It's repeating. It's always repeating. That's when it hit me. The call wasn't just from a panicked civilian. It wasn't just a warning. It was a loop. A replay of events that were happening now, had happened before and would happen again. The line between past and present dissolved, leaving me trapped in a narrative I couldn't control. Every word on the phone was both memory and prediction. I was both witness and participant. I stayed there, heart hammering, listening as the voice dictated the horrors within. The crying, the whispers, the movement in the shadows. It was precise. I could almost anticipate each sound before it happened. Guided by the voice that had heard it before it occurred, the tension built, a coiled spring in my chest, tightening until my ribs ached. And then came the final instructions. Sheriff, you must leave. Now. They know you're here. They see you. If you stay, you won't escape the loop. I bolted. I ran through the garden, through the fog, feeling eyes on my back, the cold breath of something unseen brushing against my neck. The voices faded, leaving only the static hum of the line, a ghostly echo of the events I had witnessed. Back in my car, shaking, hands slick with sweat, I realized that the call hadn't ended when I hung up. Its residue lingered in the night, in the fog, in the shapes that moved just out of sight. It was more than a warning. It was a command, a map, a history of tragedy written across time itself. Every shift, every call, every sound I'd ever responded to began to merge in my mind. The dead, the warnings, the shadows, they all intertwined, threading to the present and past until I couldn't tell which events I remembered and which had been dictated by the voice. Sleep became impossible. I lay awake, the phone beside me, wondering when the next call would come, if it would call me again, and deep down I knew it would, because the loop wasn't finished. The narrative wasn't complete. Someone or something was orchestrating it, and I was trapped as its witness, its chronicler, its unwilling participant. The next morning, I tried to tell myself it had been a dream, that the cries, the shadows, the voice on the phone, they were hallucinations born of fear and old habits. But the evidence was undeniable. Notes I hadn't written appeared in my notebook. Words I didn't remember putting down. Sketches of rooms and figures that matched the house exactly. The calls continued, sporadically at first, then with a rhythm I could sense without being conscious. Every time I picked up the phone, the voice guided me through events I hadn't yet lived, through tragedies I couldn't stop, through a repetition that seemed designed to break the mind. And I understood then, fully, that the warnings were never meant to prevent harm. They were meant to teach, to prepare, to make me understand that some things, no matter how much you want to change them, are immutable. The loop is eternal. The cycle repeats. The line between past and present, life and death, is thinner than we imagine. I keep the phone nearby now, even when I'm awake, even when the sun is up. I cannot ignore it. I cannot escape it. And every time it rings, I know that the voice will speak, that the events will unfold, that the repetition will continue. I've come to accept it. Not fully, but enough to survive. To exist in this liminal space between memory and prophecy, between the dead and the living, between what has happened and what will happen. And I wait, because eventually the call will come again. The station was quieter than I had ever remembered it. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed softer, as if the building itself had finally exhaled after years of holding in tension. I walked through the halls, keys jingling at my belt, boots clicking against a linoleum floor. It was the last time I'd do this. The last time I'd touched the walls that had held so many hours of fear, confusion, and grief. I should have felt relief, maybe even pride. Instead, I felt hollow. Shadows lingered longer than they should. Corners seemed darker, deeper. I knew, even then, that leaving didn't mean escaping. Leaving only meant stepping into the next layer. The radio sat on the front desk, a relic I had kept out of habit. I almost didn't notice it at first, but then it crackled, just a low pop, almost dismissible, like the last flicker of static before a station goes dead. I froze. Sheriff, it was faint, so faint that I thought my ears were playing tricks. But the voice was unmistakable, familiar. I could feel it vibrating through the air, threading through the silence of the empty station. Sheriff, don't, it's not over. I gripped the counter, knuckles white, breathing shallow. I told myself it was old wiring, a delayed echo of someone else's voice, the stress of years catching up, but I knew better. I had known better for nights that bled into mornings, for calls that twisted reality around me, for voices that weren't meant to speak. I remember thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe the radio's last message is nothing, a final crackle before silence swallows the building. But the whisper persisted, weaving itself into my skin, curling around my spine like smoke. You can't leave. The words hit me differently than anything before. Not panic, not fear, recognition. I realized in that moment that the shift, the warnings, the horrors, they were not tied to the station, to the night, to the job. They were tied to me, and me leaving meant nothing. I reached for the radio, hand trembling. It felt heavier than it should, almost alive, as though holding it meant holding the weight of every call I had answered, every scream I had heard, every shadow that had moved just beyond my sight. I wanted to throw it across the room, shatter it, free myself. But even in my desire to destroy it, I couldn't. The voice was patient, insistent, and I understood then that patience is infinitely more terrifying than haste. "Sheriff, they wait. Always." The room seemed to pulse with the words. I swear the walls expanded, the shadows stretching out, reaching, leaning toward me. I wanted to turn away, to run, to step outside and let the night reclaim me. But my feet were rooted, not with fear, but with understanding. The horror didn't begin or end with me leaving the station. It was larger, older, continuous. I finally walked to the door, keys in hand. Every step echoed, empty and hollow. I paused before turning the knob. The radio crackled again, soft now, almost mournful. And never, I didn't answer. I didn't move for a moment longer than I should have. The silence pressed against me, a living thing, reminding me of every night I had spent chasing shadows, responding to calls that twisted and shifted through time and memory. I realized that this station, this shift, this life, it was all part of a continuum I could not escape. The street outside looked ordinary at first glance. Streetlights flickered in lazy cycles, fog curling in uneven patches, leaves clinging to the edges of the sidewalks. But the air had a weight I hadn't expected. Heavy, almost liquid, thick with anticipation. The faintest echo of whispers teased my ears, as if the radio had followed me, carried its message to the walls and into the night. I drove slowly, windshield streaked with condensation, eyes scanning every corner, every alley, every shadow that seemed just a little too still. For a moment, I almost felt normal, almost believed that leaving the station meant leaving the last remnants of the shift behind. But I didn't. I never did. The calls, the radios, the warnings, they followed me not in sound but in perception. Every creak of a floorboard, every gust of wind through an empty street, every reflection in a darkened window reminded me that the line between my life and the horrors I'd seen was thinner than paper. And paper, I realized, tears easily. I remembered each one of them. The voices from beyond, the officers, the civilians, the echoes of tragedies repeating endlessly. Their warnings had been precise, sometimes fragmented, sometimes maddeningly incomplete. They hadn't just saved me, they had trained me, conditioned me, taught me to recognize the signs, to feel the presence before I saw it, to obey when survival demanded it. And now, with the station behind me, the radio crackling softly on the passenger seat, I understood the cruel truth. Training never ends. The shift never truly ends. The warnings, the calls, the horrors, they continue, folded into the edges of life, waiting for the unprepared, the unwary, the foolish who think the night's terror can be left behind with a uniform and a badge. I parked outside my small home, breathing ragged, shoulders heavy. I wanted to step inside, lock the door, turn the radio off, and pretend that normal life awaited. But the whispers followed, teasing, reminding, threading into my thoughts. And the radio, I knew better than to silence it. Even quieted, it would speak. Even unplugged, its echoes would remain. I thought about Harris, Larson, the others who had come before me, who had warned, who had disappeared, who had become part of the loop. I thought about the civilians, the repeated tragedies, the calls that told events before they occurred. I thought about myself, a man who had spent decades believing that duty was finite, that shifts ended, that time moved in straight lines. It doesn't. I stepped inside, leaving the car running, the radio humming low. I could hear the floor creak under my weight, the wind brushing against the walls, the distant murmur of something alive in the dark. I hung my coat, unhooked my keys, and for a moment, let the quiet settle. Not silence, quiet. The difference was important. Silence is empty. Quiet can be watched, measured, filled. I sat in my living room, eyes fixed on the radio, fingers twitching. I wanted to ignore it, pretend it was just equipment, just static, just the last remnants of a career spent chasing phantoms. But I knew, I always knew, the crackle returned, soft at first, almost intimate, carried with a cadence I recognized. Sheriff listened always. It wasn't a call, not really, not a warning this time, just a reminder of what I had done, what I had seen, what I could never leave behind. I closed my eyes, tried to breathe, tried to remember a life before all this. But even memories have weight, and they pull you back into the loop. Every sound, every shadow, every whisper became a tether. A thread connected me to the shift that never ended. I opened my eyes again, staring at the radio. It hummed. A faint vibration in the wooden table. A pulse echoing the years, the hours, the terror. I touched it, expecting cold, hard plastic, but it felt warmer, almost alive. The hair on my arms rose. My pulse caught. I knew, in that moment, that leaving the station had never meant freedom. The night pressed against the windows. Fog curled in the corners of the yard. Trees whispered in the wind. And I sat there, knowing that my shift, was still active. That the horror, the warnings, the voices, they weren't bound by walls or time or death. They were bound to me. I remember the first call of my last shift, the dog in the yard, the voices on the radio, the events repeating before they happened. I remembered Harris disappearing in the fog, the civilians' panic, the loop of tragedy and warning. And now, years later, standing in my own home, I understood fully that nothing changes. The shift never ends. You can leave the station, retire to uniform, close the door, but the world doesn't stop speaking to those who have been trained to listen. The radio crackled one last time that night. Just a soft, static-filled murmur, a whisper curling into my ear like smoke. Not over, never over. I didn't answer. I couldn't. But I listened. I always listen. And somewhere, far away, in a place beyond the living and the dead, the shift continues. Waiting, watching, patient. Even now I hear it. Even now I know it. Even now I understand that silence is not the end. It's only the prelude.